Chapter 3370. Sky Sword Leader Chapter 365. Sky Sword Leader Boom. Zhong Mingyu stood in the void, and the powerful sword aura around him formed a ripple of sword intent that surged in all directions, causing the void to rumble endlessly. Terrifying. Everyone's eyes trembled, the shock in their hearts was indescribable. They all knew that the Sky Protector was strong, but they didn't expect it to be this strong. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren felt Zhong Mingyu's sword aura and their eyes narrowed. They had already sensed that Zhong Mingyu's current sword realm was at the seventh sky of Holy Enlightenment. The first three realms were Sword Rhythm, Oracle, and Holy Enlightenment, collectively known as the Mortal Sage realm. Zhong Mingyu was so young, but he was already at the seventh sky of Holy Enlightenment, almost standing at the peak of the Mortal Sage realm. His talent in Sword Dao could be described with one word: terrifying. So you're already at the seventh sky of Holy Enlightenment, no wonder you dare to be so insolent in front of us. In the next moment the Absolute Eagle King sneered. His tone changed as he said, however, if you think you can suppress the two of us with your strength at the seventh heaven of holy justice, you're too naive. I'm insolent? Zhong Mingyu sneered. You killed my Sky Sword Martialist as the Sky Protector, shouldn't I seek justice for them? Seek justice for a few ants? Gui Tongren sneered, his eyes filled with disdain. Zhong Mingyu, are you stupid or crazy? The dozens of people who died in the Clear Sky Sword Martial were all swordsmen with ordinary talent. To put it bluntly, they were all sword slaves. Zhong Mingyu directly fell out with 7 despaired Devil Palace and Ghost Jail sect for a few sword slaves. Such an action was unwise in anyone's eyes. They are my Sky Sword Martialist, they can die in the Sky Sword Martialist, but not in the hands of others. Zhong Mingyu was very tyrannical. He growled and coldly swept his gaze over the swordsmen behind Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. He said solemnly, "Who killed Clear Sky Sword Martial's people, stand out." Everyone felt Zhong Mingyu's killing intent, their faces changed. What did Zhong Mingyu want to do? Could it be that he wanted to kill the people of the Demon Palace and Ghost Prison? They're just a bunch of ants. What's there to say about killing them? At this moment, a purple-haired figure stood out and said with a cold and contemptuous expression, "You so-called protectors, the sky, have controlled the Sky Sword Martial for so many years, yet you have not been able to nurture a swordsman who can pluck the heart of the sky. The people who came to welcome us are all trash. You guys are looking down on our 7 despaired Devil Palace and Ghost Jail sect. Killing them is just a warning to you guys. Could it be that you think that those trash shouldn't be killed?" With that, the man looked straight at Zhong Mingyu, his eyes cold and arrogant. The person who suddenly stood out was none other than the genius of the Ghost Jail sect, Gui Jiaozi, the last disciple of Gui Tongren. Zhong Mingyu looked at Gui Jiao and asked in a cold tone, "You killed him? So what if I did? With my teacher here, do you dare to kill me?" Gui Jiao's lips twitched as he taunted. Of course, he knew that he wasn't Zhong Mingyu's match, but his teacher, Gui Tongren, made him fearless. Just a bunch of trash, are they worthy of Lord Zhong's anger? At this moment, another voice sounded. It was Heartless from the 7 despaired Devil Palace. He said in a cold tone, "Your Sky Sword Martial sect's swordsmen couldn't take down the heart of the sky. In the end, didn't you guys still need our 7 despaired Devil Palace and Ghost Jail sect to take action? This time, this young master is participating in the Sky Sword Martial sect. Not only will I take down the heart of the sky, I will also kill the swordsmen of your Sky Sword Martial sect. All of you better pray that you don't meet this young master on the Sky Sword Martial sect." The cold voice was filled with arrogance and tyranny. Although Heartless' eyes were covered by the blindfold, it was as if he could see everything. These two guys are too arrogant. The eyes of the people of the Sky Sword Martial sect trembled as they gnashed their teeth in anger. Gui Jiao and Heartless were both more arrogant than the other. It was as if they would definitely be able to take down the heart of the Sky Sword martial sect. The swordsmen present were all geniuses. They had their own pride. If the heart of the sky was really taken away by either Heartless or Gui Jiao in this competition in the Sky Sword martial sect, then the face of the Sky Sword martial sect would really be lost. Heartless, Gui Jiao, you two are too arrogant. Apart from me, sinful self, no one can take down the heart of the sky. Just at this moment, a deep roar rang out from the void. After that, the void actually exploded as two silhouettes walked out from the void. Everyone was startled by the sudden and domineering voice, and they immediately went over to it. What entered their eyes was a gray-robed old man and a white-robed swordsman. The gray-robed old man looked haggard, but his eyes were incomparably sharp. The aura around him was vigorous, not the slightest bit weaker than Solitary Eagle King and Gui Tongren. However, the white-robed swordsman was even more eye-catching. He looked very young, even younger than Heartless and Gui Jiao. However, his aura was stronger than the latter, and the sword intent surging around him was even sharper. His entire body was surging with a mysterious sword intent, constantly circulating around his body like a layer of protective shield. His eyes were calm and not ostentatious, but they gave off an incomparably sharp feeling. Sinful self. He is sinful self. Everyone looked at the white-robed swordsman and was stunned for a moment before they finally reacted and immediately shouted. Their eyes were filled with worship and fear at the same time. This white-robed swordsman was the top of the Sky Sword list, Sky Sword Chief, Jun's sinful self. In the Sky Sword Martial, Jun's sinful self was a legendary existence. He didn't come from a domain, nor did he come from the sacred world, but was born in the Sky Sword Martial. It was said that his mother used to be a protector of the Sky Sword Martial. For some reason, she came to the Sky Sword Martial, only to find out later that she was pregnant and died giving birth to him. After that, Jun's sinful self grew up under the protection of the Sky Protectors and displayed an extremely powerful talent in the way of the sword. At the age of 500, Jun's sinful self became the Sky Sword Chief, and until now, he still maintained that position. During this time, many people tried to challenge his position, but they were all defeated by him in one move. Among the swordsmen of the same level, no one could make Jun's sinful self use a second sword. Actually, Jun's sinful self didn't have his current name before, because he hated himself for causing his mother's death, so he changed his name to Sinful Self. Previously, everyone was still wondering why Jun's sinful self hadn't appeared after the Sky Sword Seal opened, but it turned out that he had already arrived in the Sky Sword Seal. Sinful Self, when did you come back? Zhong Mingyu saw Jun's sinful self appear, and couldn't help but frown, asking in surprise. In this time's competition in the sky, other than the Seven Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect, there was another force participating, the Yu King Sword sect. Zhong Mingyu let Jun's sinful self go to the Yu King Sword sect alone to welcome the people from the Yu King Sword sect. Chapter 3371. Chapter 366 of WAR. Chilling to the bone. Zhong Mingyu looked at Jun Zueji with an ugly expression. Jun Zueji had returned to the Sky Sword Bastion and not told him. Instead, he had hidden himself, which made him angry. First Protector, this is the third elder of the Yu King Sword Bastion, Lord Lu Mu. Jun Zueji looked at Zhong Mingyu and did not answer his question. Instead, he pointed at the gray-robed elder beside him and introduced him. Junior Zhong Mingyu greets Senior Lu Mu. Zhong Mingyu frowned but endured it and bowed slightly to Lu Mu. Jun Zueji must have had Lu Mu's help to hide in the void for so long without being discovered. As the third elder of the Yu King Sword Bastion, Lu Mu must be very strong. So you are Zhong Mingyu. You have reached the seventh heaven of Saint Realm at such a young age. As expected of the Lord's disciple. Lu Mu glanced at Zhong Mingyu and laughed loudly. Senior, you flatter me. Zhong Mingyu's eyes narrowed slightly and then he noticed something. he asked, Senior, where are the people of the Yu King Sword Bastion? Logically speaking, the Yu King Sword Bastion should have sent young swordsmen to participate in the Sky Sword Bastion. Why did Lu Mu come alone and not see anyone else? Lu Mu's mouth twitched and his eyes were cold. He did not say anything but looked at Jun Zueji strangely. I am the person sent by the Yu King Sword Bastion to participate in the competition in the Sky Sword Bastion. Jun Zueji's eyes flashed and he said coldly, What? Zhong Mingyu could not help but be stunned when he heard Jun Zueji's words. His eyes trembled and he cried out, What did Jun Zueji say? Did I hear wrongly? The other people of the Sky Sword Bastion were also shocked and cried out. The way they looked at Jun Zueji became strange and complicated. Jun Zueji said he was representing the Yu King Sword Bastion to participate in the competition in the Sky Sword Bastion. What was going on? He was from the Sky Sword Bastion. He was born in the Sky Sword Bastion and grew up in the Sky Sword Bastion. How could he represent the Yu King Sword Bastion to participate in the competition in the Sky Sword Bastion? I have already joined the Yu King Sword clan. From now on, I have nothing to do with the sword warriors in the sky. Jun Zueji's face was cold. His words were like a boulder falling into the water, stirring up huge waves. The eyes of everyone from the Clear Sky Sword Martial sect became sluggish and their expressions stiffened. They could not believe their ears. Jun Zueji actually joined the Yu King Sword sect. Wasn't he betraying the Sky Sword Warrior by doing this? He was born in the Sky Sword Martial, grew up in the Sky Sword Martial, and became famous in the Sky Sword Martial. But now, he had betrayed the Sky Sword Martial and joined the Yu King Sword sect. What was even more hateful was that he had to represent the Yu King Sword sect and compete in the sky. This was a blatant slap to the face of the Sky Sword Martialist and the Seven Guardians. The Seven Despair Demon Palace and the Ghost Jail sect had killed the people of the Sky Sword Martial. Heartless and Charming Ghost were incomparably arrogant. Everyone was hoping that Jun Zueji would appear and help the Sky Sword Martial regain face. But who would have thought that after Jun Zueji appeared, he would give the Sky Sword Martial an even more resounding slap to the face. The dignified sword chief of the Sky Sword Martial had publicly betrayed the Sky Sword Martial. This slap to the face was resounding. Traitor, kill this traitor. In the next moment, everyone came to their senses and shouted. They all wanted to kill Jun Zueji. But at this time, Zhong Mingyu waved his hand, indicating for everyone to be quiet. The shouting stopped. Zhong Mingyu looked at Jun Zueji and asked, Why? Because the Yu King Sword sect can let me leave this place. Jun Zueji said solemnly, To me, the Sky Sword Martial is not a place to grow up, nor is it a home. It is a prison. Now I will break this prison with my own hands. Boom. As his voice fell, Jun Zueji took a step forward. Sword intent surged from all over his body and rushed into the void, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. Oracle First Layer. Zhong Mingyu's eyes trembled and he exclaimed in his heart. So Jun Zueji had reached the Oracle First Layer. Just a few days ago, when Jun Zueji left here, he was only at the 9th layer of Sword Rhyme. Who would have thought that in just a few days, he would become an Oracle Swordsman? Oracle Sword Realm. At the same time, Heartless and Gue Jiaozi's eyes trembled and they cried out in horror. The two of them were at the 9th layer of Sword Rhyme and were already peerless monsters. Jun Zueji was younger than them, but he had reached the Oracle Realm. It was truly terrifying. The 9th layer of Sword Rhyme and the 1st layer of Oracle seemed to be only one layer apart, but the real difference was like heaven and earth. Jun Zueji was indeed worthy of being the sword chief of the Sky Sword Dao. His talent in the way of the sword was shocking. Alright. At this time, Zhong Mingyu suddenly opened his mouth and laughed. Jun Zueji, so in your heart, the Sky Sword Martial has no gratitude to speak of. Instead, it is your prison. Such a clear distinction between gratitude and grudges, it really broadened my horizons. Of course, it was sarcasm. What Zhong Mingyu really wanted to say was, repaying kindness with enmity. The Sky Sword Marshal had groomed Jun Zueji, but the latter had joined the Yu King Sword sect and slapped the Sky Sword Marshal's face. If this wasn't repaying kindness with enmity, then what was? In my eyes, there is only benefit, no gratitude or grudges. Jun Zueji was very calm. His eyes were so cold that it made people shiver. He said, I want to go further, so I must break the prison of the Sky Sword Marshal. The phrase, go further, was said with confidence. Jun Zueji's coldness reminded Nie Tian of a person who had died a long time ago, Luo Xian. Of course, Luo Xian's goal was to go further and kill Nie Tian. This kind of person who would do anything for benefits was really cold to the bone. Very good. Then let me see how far you, Jun Zueji, can go. Zhong Mingyu smiled cold, his eyes flashing with killing intent. He had trusted Jun Zueji so much, but what he got in return was the most painful betrayal. If he didn't still have the slightest bit of rationality, he would have already attacked and killed Jun Zueji. Jun Zueji was now a member of the Yu King Sword sect. Lu Mu had accompanied him to the Sky Sword Marshal to protect his safety. Zhong Mingyu wanted to see how far this traitor could go. Everyone looked at Jun Zueji with the same look of resentment, gnashing their teeth. But it was a pity that their strength was too weak compared to Jun Zueji. At this time, Lu Mu took a step forward and asked with a smile, Nephew Mingyu, can we start the competition in the Sky Sword Marshal now? The Yu King Sword sect had stolen a member of the Sky Sword Marshal, and Lu Mu could still look calm. His skin was really thick. What's the rush? Zhong Mingyu sneered, then turned his gaze to Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. He said coldly, the matter of the 7 Ultimate Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect killing our Sky Sword Marshal is not over yet. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren were stunned at the same time, then they sneered. Zhong Mingyu, with your status, you can't be thinking of making a move on Heartless and Gui Jiao, right? Heartless and Gui Jiao were naturally juniors in front of Zhong Mingyu. If Zhong Mingyu personally made a move, it wouldn't look good. Chapter 3372. A single sword duel, Zhong Mingyu's cold voice stunned Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. Then, their faces revealed a disdainful smile. At this time, the others were also stunned, looking at Zhong Mingyu in shock. They really did not expect that Zhong Mingyu would directly challenge Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. Everyone thought that Zhong Mingyu would let the swordsmen of Sky Sword Marshals challenge Heartless and Gui Jiaozi. In fact, Zhong Mingyu naturally wanted to do so, but looking at the entire Sky Sword Marshals, he did not see anyone who had the strength to fight against Heartless and Gui Jiaozi. The only swordsman, Sky Sword Chief King Sin's self, fearless of Heartless and Gui Jiaozi, had now become a member of Yu King Sword sect. Zhong Mingyu could not let a traitor challenge Heartless and Gui Jiaozi. Therefore, at this moment, in order to redeem the face of Sky Sword Marshals, he had to do it himself. Absolute Eagle King was stunned, then sneered. Zhong Mingyu, you want to challenge both of us? May I ask who you want to challenge? I or Brother Gui? Zhong Mingyu, do you recognize your own strength? At the same time, Gui Tongren sneered. Don't think that you can fight against us just because you are at the 7th level of Saint Realm. To Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren, Zhong Mingyu's challenge was simply a joke. Both of them were at the 9th level of Saint Realm, and they had been at this realm for many years. Their understanding and control of sword intent had already reached perfection. Zhong Mingyu was so young, and with the difference in realm, how could he be their match? Zhong Mingyu must have been muddled by Jun Sin's self's betrayal, which was why he was stupid enough to challenge 2 swordsmen who were far superior to him. I know my own strength very well. Zhong Mingyu sneered, his gaze sweeping across Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren, This Zhong is untalented. I want to challenge both of you. Do you dare to accept my challenge? His voice wasn't loud, but every word was like a clap of thunder that resounded in everyone's ears. No one had thought that he would challenge both Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren at the same time. 1 against 2, Zhong Mingyu was indeed very confident in his own strength. First Protector, don't be rash. At this time, Eternally Merciless' eyes trembled. He immediately reacted and transmitted his voice to Zhong Mingyu. In the Sacred Sword realm, the gap between every level was huge. Even if Zhong Mingyu was extremely talented, it would still be very difficult for him to fight against a swordsman who was at the 9th heaven of Saint Doctrine. Furthermore, Zhong Mingyu was challenging 2 9th-tier holy swordsmen at the same time. In the eyes of any normal person, Zhong Mingyu's actions were no different from suicide. I know what I'm doing, Zhong Mingyu replied calmly as he glanced at Eternally Merciless. Eternally Merciless stared blankly for a moment. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. He understood Zhong Mingyu's character. Once he decided on something, he would not turn back. Following that, countless people's gazes focused on Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren, waiting for them to respond. Zhong Mingyu, are you thinking too highly of yourself, or are you looking down on us? Absolute Eagle King's lips curled into a cold smile. He said, with your cultivation at the 7th heaven of Saint Doctrine, you want to fight against both of us at the same time? Are you seeking death? Whether I seek death or not, that's my own business. Zhong Mingyu was very calm. There was not much emotion in his eyes. He said, if I, Zhong Mingyu, die in your hands, I will die without regrets. All right. Gui Tongren frowned and said loudly, since you insist on seeking death, then we will fulfill your wish. Zhong Mingyu's face darkened. His lips curled into a cold smile. He said, in this battle, we will only use one sword to determine victory and defeat, not life and death. Only use one sword, not life and death? Absolute Eagle King sneered. He said, Zhong Mingyu, are you afraid? What's the point of this battle if we don't decide life and death? Gui Tongren sneered. To determine victory and defeat, there will naturally be a price to pay. Zhong Mingyu smiled cold. He said, if I lose, the 10,000 swordsmen of the Sky Sword sect will immediately withdraw from the Sky Martial competition and will not step onto the Sky Sword platform. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren were stunned when they heard Zhong Mingyu's words. Then, their eyes revealed joy. They didn't think that Zhong Mingyu would dare to bet so much. If he lost, it would mean that no one from the Sky Sword sect would be able to step onto the Sky Sword platform. Zhong Mingyu, if you win, do you want to kill the swordsmen of the Ghost Jail sect and the 7 Despair Demon Palace? At this time, Gui Tongren sneered and asked. I won't kill them. Zhong Mingyu laughed. He said, if I win, I will make the people of the 7 Despair Demon Palace and the Ghost Jail sect kneel below the Sky Sword platform for 3 days to apologize to the swordsmen of the Sky Sword sect that you killed. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren's faces darkened, instantly becoming very ugly. They didn't think that Zhong Mingyu's conditions would be even harsher. Including the 2 of you, you will also have to kneel. Then, Zhong Mingyu sneered again and said loudly, do you dare to bet on this kind of victory? Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren's faces darkened. If they lost and had to kneel in front of everyone for 3 days, their old face would be thrown back into their mother's womb. If this news were to spread, how would they stand in the future? You two, are you afraid? Zhong Mingyu looked at Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren and said provocatively, didn't you say that I was courting death? Why don't you dare to fight me now? Humph. At this time, Yu King Sword Sect's elder Lu Mu sneered. He said, 2 swordsmen of the 9th sky of holy righteousness are actually afraid of a swordsman of the 7th sky of holy righteousness. What a joke. Fight. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tong Ren's eyes trembled. They looked at each other and roared at the same time. At this moment, if they didn't dare to fight, they would also lose face. Plus, they felt that Zhong Mingyu was bluffing. A swordsman of the 7th sky of holy righteousness could not fight against 2 swordsmen of the 9th sky of holy righteousness. Alright, Zhong Mingyu roared as his lips curled up into a smile. He then looked at Lu Mu and said, Elder Lu Mu, please be our witness. How about it? I'd love to. Lu Mu smiled faintly with a playful look on his face. This battle, no matter who won or lost, he would be happy to see it. Therefore, he would not reject this opportunity to be a witness. Thank you. Zhong Mingyu nodded and stepped out. His silhouette flashed and he shot up into the sky. Looking down at Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren, he arrogantly said, You too, come at me. You're asking to be humiliated. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren glanced at each other and moved at the same time. They shot up into the sky and stood opposite Zhong Mingyu. Hum. In the next second, the 3 of them shook as 3 terrifying sword energies shot up into the sky. They were like 3 mysterious mountains that stood between the heaven and earth, not giving way to each other. The crowd's eyes were trembling with excitement. To be able to watch 3 swordsmen fight made them very excited. Chapter 3373. Boom, boom, boom. High up in the sky, Zhong Mingyu, Absolute Eagle King, and Gui Tongren stood majestically like 3 towering peaks. Their imposing aura caused the earth to tremble. The crowd looked at the 3 silhouettes, their eyes trembling uncontrollably. They looked extremely nervous. The battle between Zhong Mingyu and the other 2 would decide the fate of everyone present. If Zhong Mingyu lost, then the tens of thousands of swordsmen from the Sky Martial Arts sect would not be able to compete in the Sky Martial Arts sect. If Zhong Mingyu won, then the people from the 7 Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect would have to kneel in front of everyone for 3 days. Zhong Mingyu's methods were indeed ruthless. If the people from the Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect were to kneel for 3 days, they would never be able to wash away the humiliation. The eyes of the people from the Clear Sky Sword Martial sect were burning, and their expressions were filled with worry. Although Zhong Mingyu was the first guardian and had shown great strength, he was only at the 7th sky of Saint Realm. His opponents were 2 swordsmen at the 9th sky of Saint Realm. What kind of talent could make up for such a huge gap in strength? On the other hand, the people from the 7 Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect had evil smiles on their faces. It was obvious that victory was in their hands. This Zhong Mingyu guy is a little arrogant. It's a pity that he's too stupid. He wants to fight against 2 swordsmen at the 9th sky of Saint Realm? What a joke. Just you wait. After this sword, even if the 2 lords don't kill him, they will cripple him. The people from the Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect laughed coldly and discussed. Boom. At this moment, Zhong Mingyu's body shook. A crazy sword will burst out, surging in the sky. It was extremely terrifying, as if it was going to tear the sky apart. So strong. The crowd felt the sword will ripple in the air. Even the people from the Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect were shocked. Although Zhong Mingyu was only at the 7th sky of Saint Realm, the sword aura he displayed was even more terrifying than the average swordsman at the 9th sky of Saint Realm. At this moment, the people from the Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect could not help but look serious. Zhong Mingyu is indeed a genius in the way of the sword. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been favored by that person. In the distance, the Yu King Sword sect's elder Lu Mu looked at Zhong Mingyu. His lips twitched as he muttered, but it's far from enough to fight against Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren with this kind of sword momentum. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren were famous swordsmen who had been immersed in the 9 heavens of holy doctrine for many years. Of course, they were not ordinary swordsmen of the 9 heavens of holy doctrine. QL11 Zhong Mingyu's current sword momentum was more than enough to deal with an ordinary 9th heaven saint. However, it was still far from enough to deal with Zhu Gui and Zhu Gui. Zhong Mingyu, you think you can fight against the two of us with just this level of strength? Up in the air, the absolute Eagle King laughed coldly. A dark sword force appeared around his body, like a dark cloud, enveloping his entire body. A terrifying dark energy surged in the air, as if it wanted to devour everything. Boom! The void exploded. The absolute Eagle King's sword was not any weaker than Zhong Mingyu's. Ignorant brat, get ready to surrender. At the same time, Gui Tongren's voice rang out. An evil sword intent surged around his body. It was incomparably sharp, as if it could tear through everything. Boom! Boom! In the next instant, the sword intent of the absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren suddenly erupted like a raging tsunami. It was extremely terrifying and actually fused together in the air, forming an even more powerful sword intent. Haha! That Zhong Mingyu is going to lose for sure. The people of Devil Palace and Ghost Prison laughed wildly when they saw this scene. The combination of the absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren's aura was so terrifying that it seemed to have surpassed the limits of the mortal saint realm. How could Zhong Mingyu resist? First Protector, how can he win in this situation? Nie Tian looked at Zhong Mingyu from afar and couldn't help but frown. He was secretly worried. Although his strength was far from the level of Zhong Mingyu and Gui Tongren, his divine sense was linked to the eternal night demon fox. His perception was very strong, so he could feel that Zhong Mingyu's sword intent had already been pushed to the limit. At this moment, even if Zhong Mingyu ignited his blood qi, he still wouldn't be able to resist the absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. If it was just the absolute Eagle King or Gui Tongren, perhaps Zhong Mingyu still had a chance. But with the two of them joining hands, he had no chance at all. If you want to win this battle of one sword, I'm afraid you'll need the help of the heavens. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice rang out, shaking his head. Even he felt that Zhong Mingyu would lose without a doubt. Make your move. At this moment, Zhong Mingyu coldly stood in the air and said in a deep voice. His expression was so calm that it made people's hair stand on end. There was not a single trace of fear on his face. There was not a single ripple in his eyes. He was still as confident as before. Deliberately mystifying. The absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren roared at the same time, after which their silhouettes moved, combining their sword intent into one. A gigantic sword shadow appeared, rumbling like the roar of a gigantic beast as it pressed towards Zhong Mingyu. At this moment the void trembled. The entire heaven and earth trembled, as if the sky was going to collapse and the earth was going to crack. The combination of two sword masters of the 9th tier of holy doctrine was too terrifying. The gigantic sword shadow, with the power to destroy heaven and earth, slashed down towards Zhong Mingyu. The terrifying qi seemed like it was going to destroy everything. The crowd's eyes widened and their nerves tightened. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. It was as if they could already see the scene of Zhong Mingyu being killed by the sword. But at this moment, Zhong Mingyu stood in the air, unmoving like a bell. The gigantic sword shadow was getting closer and closer to him. 10,000 meters. 5,000 meters. 1,000 meters. At this moment, Zhong Mingyu's figure finally moved. A terrifying sword aura burst forth as a tremendous sword will burst forth. Like a raging tidal wave, it spread out. The sword will seem to contain a very mysterious power. The moment it came into contact with the gigantic sword shadow, it disappeared into it. This strange scene caused everyone to be stunned, and a puzzled look appeared on their faces. Could it be that Zhong Mingyu's sword intent was directly swallowed by the gigantic sword shadow? However, in the next instant a strange scene occurred. The gigantic sword shadow suddenly trembled in the air. Then, a terrifying crack appeared on the sword shadow and instantly spread out. In the blink of an eye, the sword shadow exploded and split into two. Then, the boundless sword intent exploded, transforming into endless waves that crashed into the void, as if it was going to destroy everything. Hum. Hum. At this moment, in the void, two muffled sounds rang out at the same time. Two silhouettes shook in the air and then, like kites with their strings cut, they were sent flying. That is. This sudden scene caused the crowd's eyes to widen. Then, they looked at the two silhouettes and their expressions froze. They were so shocked that they couldn't say a word. Chapter 3374. Kneel. Up in the sky, countless pairs of eyes stared at the two figures that were sent flying. Their expressions were lifeless, and the shock in their hearts was perfectly written on their faces. This scene was something that they had never imagined, and it was something that they could not believe. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren were both sent flying. Just what was going on? Their combined aura was clearly several times stronger than Zhong Mingyu's, but why were they the ones who were sent flying? What was going on with the strange scene in the sky? The shock in the crowd's eyes was indescribable, and they could not react for a long time. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren stabilized themselves in the air. There was blood at the corner of their mouths, and their faces were extremely ugly, as if they were dead. Defeated. They actually lost. Two swordsmen of the 9th heavenly layer of holy righteousness working together had actually lost to a 7th heavenly layer holy righteousness sword master. Absolute Eagle King Gui Tongren, you've lost. At this time, Zhong Mingyu took a step forward and said coldly, Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. His eyes were very firm, but in the deepest part of them, there was a chilling aura. What is going on? At this time, the crowd finally reacted. They looked at Zhong Mingyu in shock and exclaimed. At this time, if not for the bet between Zhong Mingyu and Absolute Ghost, the crowd would have thought that Absolute Ghost and Gui Tongren lost on purpose. The scene just now was too strange. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren were defeated in an inexplicable manner. Even now, the crowd could not see how Absolute Ghost and Gui Tongren lost. Ghost Emperor, what just happened? Nie Tian looked at Zhong Mingyu from afar, his voice trembling as he asked the Ghost Emperor. Zhong Mingyu, this person is too scary. The Ghost Emperor's dull expression finally reacted. He said in shock. He actually used his sword intent to affect the balance of their sword intent, causing them to clash and injure each other. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard the Ghost Emperor's words, and his heart sank. What the Ghost Emperor said was the same as what he had guessed. Zhong Mingyu wanted Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren to fight against each other and then defeat them. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren were both sword users of the 9th heavens of Saint Meaning, and their control over sword intent had already reached the acme of perfection, so they were able to ingeniously fuse the two sword energies together. However, even so, it was still a sword intent that belonged to two people and could not truly merge into one. As for Zhong Mingyu, he used his own sword intent to affect the balance between Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren's sword intent. Therefore, that enormous sword image would suddenly split apart, and then the two sword intents would clash, causing Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren to both lose. Everything was under Zhong Mingyu's control. From the very beginning, he had set up a trap for Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. He challenged both of them at the same time so that the two of them would attack together. And the strong confidence he displayed made Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren not dare to look away from him. If Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren attacked at the same time without fusing their sword energies, then the one who would lose now would definitely be Zhong Mingyu. Zhong Mingyu used Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren to defeat both of them. His scheming was simply terrifying. However, one had to admit that Zhong Mingyu was indeed courageous, daring to challenge both Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren at the same time, and even daring to use the 10,000 swordsmen in the sky to compete in the sky as a wager. Zhong Mingyu, you're really scheming. At this time, Absolute Eagle King opened his mouth and roared. His eyes were scarlet red like a wild beast, as if he wanted to eat someone. At this time, he naturally understood that he and Gui Tongren had fallen into Zhong Mingyu's trap. Zhong Mingyu, you've really opened eyes. Gui Tongren's face was similarly gloomy, his face alternating between green and red, his entire body emitting a sinister aura. Zhong Mingyu's face was cold, his gaze sweeping across Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. He coldly said, "Kneel for me." You. Absolute Eagle King's face suddenly darkened, becoming extremely ugly. Zhong Mingyu, using such a sinister method to win, what kind of ability is that? Gui Tongren roared, taking a step forward. His entire body's aura surged crazily. He actually said, "We're not convinced of our loss." Not convinced? Zhong Mingyu coldly laughed, his pair of eyes flickering with a cold light. He stared at Gui Tongren and said, "Are you going back on your words? Zhong Mingyu, if you want us to be convinced, then let's compete again." Absolute Eagle King also roared and coldly said, "I only want you to lose, I don't need you to be convinced." Zhong Mingyu smiled coldly. He directly said, "Now, all of you kneel for me, apologize to the dead swordsman in the sky." His stern voice resounded in the space, causing the surrounding void to tremble. Kneel! 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 10,000 swordsmen in the sky were affected. They shouted in unison, their aura shaking the heaven and earth. The people from Seven Despair Devil Palace and Ghost Jail sects' faces were ashen, each of their faces extremely ugly. This result was something that they had never expected. Humph. At this time, Gui Tongren coldly smiled. He looked at Zhong Mingyu and said, "What if we don't kneel?" Gui Tongren had already calculated, among the swordsmen in the sky, only Zhong Mingyu had a bit of strength, the others were like clay chickens and pottery dogs, not worth mentioning. Today, even if they wanted to act shamelessly, they could not kneel. Not kneeling? Zhong Mingyu smiled cold. He was not the least bit surprised. He had already expected that Ghost Jail sect would go back on their words. The corner of his mouth twitched. He looked at Lu Mu and said loudly, "Elder Lu Mu, do you have anything to say?" Before the battle, Zhong Mingyu specially asked Lu Mu to be a witness. It was for this moment. "You King Sword sect poached Jun Ziji. This action was very dishonorable, but this faction was still a righteous faction. Moreover, a person of Lu Mu's status definitely did not want to lose face. If Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren went back on their words, it would mean that they looked down on him as a witness. Absolute Eagle King, Gui Tongren, the two of you can be considered seniors of the Sword Dao. Could it be that you want to go back on your words?" Lu Mu took a step forward, his gaze sweeping across Gui Tongren and Gui Tongren as he spoke coldly. "So what if I go back on my words?" Absolute Eagle King's gaze darkened. He growled in a low voice, "Lu Mu, you are only a witness, you better not interfere." And Lu Mu's expression darkened, after which his silhouette flickered, directly stepping out, causing the void to tremble. His silhouette exuded an unprecedented sword aura, like a huge dragon, piercing through the void. It was so powerful that it could tear apart everything. At this moment, everyone's eyes trembled. They felt an indescribable shock. Lu Mu's sword intent far surpassed everyone's understanding. It was as if it had already reached an even more terrifying realm. Boom! In the next instant, Lu Mu's gaze darkened. The void trembled as he spoke loudly. "What if I insists on interfering?" Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren felt Lu Mu's aura. Their eyes turned sluggish, their mouths opened but no words came out. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that Lu Mu had already surpassed the mortal saint realm, reaching the legendary paragon saint realm. Chapter 3375. Kneel and Die. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren's eyes trembled. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. They weren't wrong. Lu Mu was a sword tribulation realm swordsman. Although the sword Heavenly Tribulation and the Sacred Realm were only one realm apart, the gap between them was indescribable. Even in the sacred world, most swordsmen were stuck at the ninth sky of Holiness Realm. Holiness Realm and Sword Tribulation Realm, one was the Mortal Sage Realm, the other was the Supreme Sage Realm. There was an insurmountable gap between them. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even a First Sky Sword Tribulation Realm swordsman could crush more than 10 Ninth Sky of Holiness Realm swordsmen. This was why Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren were so frightened when they sensed that Lu Mu was a Sword Tribulation Realm swordsman. If Lu Mu wanted to make a move, he could kill the two of them with one hand. At this moment, Zhong Mingyu's face was calm, but the corner of his mouth couldn't help twitching. He could tell that Lu Mu was a Sword Tribulation Realm swordsman. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked the latter to be a witness. If Lu Mu wasn't a Sword Tribulation Realm swordsman, Zhong Mingyu would have directly questioned Lu Mu. Absolute Eagle King Gui Tongren, I will ask you again. Do you still want to go back on your words? At this moment, Lu Mu smiled coldly. His eyes were cold as he said in a deep voice. This. Everyone's eyes trembled as they sucked in a cold breath. Anyone could see Lu Mu's threat and killing intent. It was obvious that if Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren went back on their words, they would be forcing Lu Mu to make a move. Once Lu Mu made a move, there would only be one outcome for them: death. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren's faces were ashen. Cold sweat dripped from their foreheads as they stood there in a daze, unable to speak for a long time. On one side was death, on the other was kneeling for 3 days. Did they have a choice? Absolute Eagle King Gui Tongren, answer I. After a while, Lu Mu spoke again. His voice was like thunder that echoed in the void. The figures of Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren swayed, as if they were struck by lightning. They almost couldn't stand. Elder Lu Mu, we can give the two lords some time to consider whether they want to live or die. Zhong Mingyu smiled faintly as a vicious glint flashed in his eyes. I want to live, I kneel. At this moment, a voice boomed out. A swordsman from the Seven Despair Devil Palace screamed out in fright as he knelt down. I also want to live, I don't want to die. Subsequently, another swordsman cried out in fright and knelt on both knees. Following that, one figure after another knelt down. Moments later, only a few of the swordsmen from the Seven Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect were still standing. The rest had all knelt down. The crowd was shocked by the scene in front of them, and then they roared with laughter. I had thought that you people had a lot of backbone, but it turns out that you are all cowards. What Devil Palace, Ghost Jail, when you are suppressed by others, aren't you all the same? Kneel for 3 days and apologize to those swordsmen from the sky who died in your hands. What about the two of you? At this moment, Zhong Mingyu spoke. His eyes were incomparably sinister as he looked at Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren and said, Will you live on your knees or die standing? Kneel. Absolute Eagle King's eyes trembled. His old face contorted as he spat out a word through gritted teeth. After saying that, his knees sank and he knelt down. A man should know when to yield and when to stand tall. Seeing this scene, Gui Tongren raised his head and looked at Lu Mu. With a low roar, he finally knelt down. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren knelt down, causing the remaining swordsmen from the Seven Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect to waver, and they all knelt down. Even Heartless and Gui Jiaozi both knelt down. In my opinion, the one who knows when to yield and when to stand tall is a tortoise. Zhong Mingyu saw this scene and the corner of his mouth twitched as he said coldly. His voice wasn't loud, but every word was like the loudest slap on the faces of the people from the Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect. I won't kneel. But at this moment, a swordsman from the Seven Despair Devil Palace didn't kneel. He raised his head and looked at Zhong Mingyu, saying in a deep voice, Kill me. There were dozens of people from the Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect, but only this one person would rather die than kneel. If you don't kneel, then live standing. Zhong Mingyu laughed and said indifferently. Everyone was stunned and had a doubtful expression, suspecting that they had heard wrongly. No one expected that Zhong Mingyu would actually not kill that person who was standing. Many thanks. That person was also stunned and only reacted after a long time. He nodded his head in thanks, neither servile nor overbearing. There were many talented swordsmen, but true unyielding swordsmen were few and far between. This swordsman's unyielding character won him the right to live. The other people from the Seven Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect looked at the standing swordsman with ugly expressions, not knowing if it was jealousy or something else. Since you don't want to kneel, then die. At this moment, the Absolute Eagle King's face suddenly darkened. With a low roar, he raised his hand and a sword flew out. Where it landed, there was a bloody light. The standing swordsman didn't have time to react and died on the spot. He didn't die in Zhong Mingyu's hands, but in the hands of his own people. The Absolute Eagle King and the others all kneeled, but he was the only one who wasn't willing to kneel. Wasn't this a slap to the Absolute Eagle King's face? One had to say that the Absolute Eagle King was indeed vicious and merciless. He would even kill his own people. The Absolute Eagle King and the others had to kneel for 3 days. Elder Lumu, we will wait for 3 days. The sky competition will begin in 3 days. Is that all right? Zhong Mingyu looked at Lumu and said with a faint smile. Of course. Lumu also smiled, his face indifferent. Following that, the people of the Devil Palace and Ghost Prison continued to kneel, while the others began to recuperate and prepare for the sky competition. Nie Tian. At this time, Nie Fenghua came to Nie Tian's side, his face a little pale. Father, are you okay? Nie Tian's divine sense swept over Nie Fenghua's body, and he couldn't help but be worried. I'm fine. Nie Fenghua smiled bitterly and said, but I probably won't be able to participate in the sky competition. Nie Tian, it seems that we can only rely on you. At the same time, Bailey Xingshue's figure came and said with a bitter smile. Nie Tian frowned, not knowing what to say. Of course, he could see that Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue were very sad, but they were forcing themselves to smile. The two of them must have prepared for the sky competition for a long time, but now they had no chance to participate. Bailey Xingxue had once arranged a battle with Nie Tian, but now, he couldn't even step onto the sword platform in the sky competition. Nie Fenghua, Bailey Xingxue, the two of you can continue to participate in the sky competition. At this time, a voice rang out, and then Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless arrived. Chapter 3376. Chapter 3371. Chapter 337 Battle of the 3-inch Really? Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue were taken aback, and then looked at Zhong Mingyu and Eternal Heartless with joy. Yes. Zhong Mingyu nodded and 2 sword crystals appeared in his hands. The sword essence was very strong. They were obviously of excellent quality. He said, in the next 3 days, Eternally Merciless and I will help the two of you fuse with the sword crystals. I hope we can help you achieve a breakthrough in your cultivation. Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue were shocked. They couldn't believe their ears. Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless were helping them fuse with the sword crystals. Zhong Mingyu didn't give them too much time and said, let's start now. Yes. Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue nodded. Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless didn't waste any time. They immediately started fusing the sword crystals for Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue. The competition in the sky would start in 3 days. They didn't have much time and had to hurry. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth rose as he thought to himself, Father and Bailey Xingxue are both transcendent profound swordsmen. If there are no mishaps, they will advance to the level of sword rhythm after fusing with the sword crystal. Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless were both sacred swordsmen. Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue were really lucky to get their help. In fact, Zhong Mingyu did this because of Nie Tian's identity, and because he had no other choice. The strength of the Sky Sword Rime was greatly reduced because of Jun Xinji's betrayal. Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue were extremely talented swordsmen. He hoped that they could perform well in the competition in the sky. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. When Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue stood up again, their auras changed. They were much sharper than before. Nie Tian sensed the auras of Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue. His eyes changed slightly and he was surprised. The realm of their swordsmanship was not weaker than Ren Kunyu and the others. This undoubtedly meant that Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue had already reached the realm of sword rime. That's right, with the help of Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless, Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue had already reached the realm of sword aura. Moreover, they were at the 4th heavenly layer of sword aura. In the distance, Ren Kunyu, Lu Yun, and the others watched with bloodshot eyes. They couldn't understand why Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless would waste their time on Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue. If the sword crystal was given to them, they might be able to reach the 9th heavenly layer of sword charm. If that was the case, wouldn't they be able to contend against Heartless and Gui Jiaozi? Zhong Mingyu, can the martial arts competition in the sky start now? At this time, Lu Mu opened his mouth and said loudly. Zhong Mingyu faintly smiled and looked at Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren on the other side. Since Senior Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren have stood up, let us begin. His indifferent voice was filled with a strong sense of mockery. Zhong Mingyu, let's wait and see. Absolute Eagle King looked at Zhong Mingyu from afar, his eyes looking as if he wanted to devour someone. He hated Zhong Mingyu to the point of gnashing his teeth, wishing that he could skin Zhong Mingyu alive. Next, this guardian announces that the martial arts competition in the sky officially begins. Zhong Mingyu didn't care about Absolute Eagle King and the others and loudly announced. As soon as his voice fell, all the swordsmen seemed to have gone crazy. Their figures moved in unison and rushed towards the sword platform in the sky. More than 10,000 swordsmen moved in unison and immediately set off a monstrous aura in the sky. Under the impact of this aura, the sword platform in the sky was as stable as a mountain and didn't move at all. On the contrary, after many warriors approached the sword platform in the sky, they felt a strong pressure and couldn't get any closer. Many people tried their best to move forward, but the pressure in the void made it impossible for them to get close. This was a restrictive power. Not only did it test the swordsman's sword intent, it also tested the swordsman's martial body, bloodline, talent, and so on. Zhong Mingyu frowned and couldn't help but shake his head. He had long since expected that out of the 10,000 people present, it would already be considered very good if half of them could ascend to the sword platform in the sky. After a while, about 4,000 people entered the sword platform in the sky, while the remaining 5,000 people were blocked outside the sword platform. The sword platform in the sky is indeed mysterious. At this time, Nie Tian's figure arrived at the sword platform in the sky and stepped on a sword seed in the sky. He was extremely shocked. He could feel that the surrounding space was filled with a suffocating sword intent. Furthermore, there was also a boundless amount of heavenly energy that was constantly flowing and surging. It was extremely magical. As for the sword shadows on the sword platform, which were the sword seeds in the sky, they were constantly absorbing energy from their surroundings to maintain their form. Let me activate the sword seed in the sky and ascend to the top of the sky. At this time, someone couldn't hold back his excitement. With a loud roar, he released the sword intent in his body and injected it into the sword seed in the sky. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the sword seed in the sky absorbed the sword intent and began to grow. It slowly grew larger and extended towards the sky, as if it was a living tree. When the others saw this, They followed suit and began to stimulate the growth of the sword seed in the sky. However, most of the swordsman's sky sword seeds grew very slowly. After a long period of time, they would only grow to a height of tens of meters. And in the sky there were 9 heavens, each one was 100 meters tall, and the peak was 900 meters tall. At this speed, most people had no chance of reaching the top. Nie Tian was not in a hurry to activate the sword seed in the sky. Instead, he observed his surroundings. He saw that the sword seeds in the sky of Rinkunyu, Luyun, and the others were growing very fast, several times faster than the others. They were all ranked in the top 10 of the sky sword ranking. They were talented and powerful, so it was expected that the sword seeds in the sky would grow very fast. At this time, Nie Tian noticed that the sword seeds in the sky of Nie Fenghua and Beili Xingxue were growing even faster than Rinkunyu and the others. In fact, it was a lot faster, almost twice as fast. Nie Fenghua and Beili Xingxue's strength was obviously similar to Rinkunyu's. Why was the growth of the sword seeds in the sky so different? It seems that the sword seeds in the sky not only test the swordsman's strength, but also their talent, sword intent, and other aspects. In the next moment, Nie Tian understood and murmured with a smile. Nie Fenghua and Beili Xingxue might not be as strong as Rinkunyu, but their talent was definitely higher than Rinkunyu's. This was because they had only been in the sky sword martial competition for a short time, but their strength had improved so quickly. This was proof of their excellent talent. Look at those 3 guys. At this time, someone noticed something and couldn't help but exclaim. Nie Tian frowned and immediately looked over. In the distance, 3 sword shadows soared into the sky. They were extremely fast, like giant dragons soaring in the sky, and their momentum was unstoppable. These 3 sword shadows were already hundreds of meters tall, far surpassing the others, and entered the 3rd heaven of the sky dome. It's the 3 of them. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he frowned slightly. The people standing on the 3 sword shadows were the 3 strongest people in this competition in the sky martial competition. The former sword chief Sinner of the Sky, Heartless of the 7 Despair Devil Palace, and Charming Ghost of the Ghost Jail Sect. Chapter 3377. Wait and see. Boom. 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 Above the sky sword platform, 3 sword shadows soared into the sky with unstoppable momentum, like Koan Pungs soaring high into the sky. These 3 guys are too terrifying. The eyes of the crowd trembled, their hearts filled with shock. It was hard to imagine how strong Jun Zueji and the other 2's sword intents were to be able to make the sky sword seed grow so quickly. Jun Zueji, Zhu Qing, and Gui Jiao, the 3's talent in the sword Dao could be said to be shocking. The sky sword seed under their feet continued to grow, extending towards the horizon as if it wanted to tear the sky apart. Humph! The first person to reach the top of the sky sword seed will be me, and only me. At that moment, Zhu Qing sneered, and a terrifying sword intent erupted from his body, pouring into the sword seed in the sky sword seed. Suddenly, a terrible black flame ignited on the sword shadow, and the sword shadow's growth speed instantly doubled. Look, that guy from the 7 Despair Devil Palace, his speed has increased. The crowd looked at Zhu Qing, and their eyes couldn't help but burn with excitement. Zhu Qing's sudden eruption excited the crowd. Just you wait, I, Zhu Qing, will wash away the humiliation of kneeling just now by reaching the top of the sky sword seed. Zhu Qing's face was gloomy as he thought to himself. Suddenly, the sword intent around his body became even more terrifying. His sword intent surged in the void like a black flame, releasing a terrifying dark aura. The sword seed in the sky sword seed under his feet was burning with black flames, looking extremely terrifying. The flames flowed in the sky like black ghost claws, causing people to tremble in fear. In just a short moment, Zhu Qing had already left Jun Zueji and Gui Jiao far behind. Zhu Qing, is it? I, Gui Jiao, may not be inferior to you. Gui Jiao looked at Zhu Qing, and the corner of his mouth twitched coldly. Then, the sword intent inside his body erupted, and a strange, evil qi surged out, causing the surrounding void to slightly tremble. A few swordsmen who were close to Gui Jiao were unexpectedly affected and fell from the sky sword seed. Boom! The next moment, Gui Jiao's sky sword seed began to grow crazily. Its speed wasn't any slower than Heartless, and it was soon on par with the latter. The sudden burst of sword intent from these two is truly terrifying. Everyone's eyes trembled as they were deeply shocked by Heartless and Gui Jiao's strength. Zhong Mingyu and the rest of the Sky Guardians had ugly expressions on their faces when they saw this. They did not feel good in their hearts. This was a martial arts competition of the Sky Sword martial artists, but at this moment it was two swordsmen from the outside world who were shining brilliantly. How could they not feel uncomfortable? What was hateful and sad was that in the huge Sky Sword martial, thousands of swordsmen ascended the Sky Sword platform, but not a single person could compare to Heartless and Gui Jiaozi. Brother Gui, the first person to ascend the Sky Vault is either Gui Jiaozi or Heartless. On the other side, the Absolute Eagle King looked at Gui Tongren and said with a faint smile. His cold eyes swept across Zhong Mingyu from time to time in a provocative manner. That's right. Gui Tongren laughed and said, "Pitiful Sky Sword martial artists. What's the use of so many swordsmen participating in this martial arts competition? They're all trash, not a single one of them is useful. What a joke." His loud voice was obviously meant for Zhong Mingyu to hear. Humph. The Absolute Eagle King sneered and suddenly looked at Lu Mu in the distance and said in a loud voice, "And that sword chief in the sky, it turns out that he's also a good-looking but useless embroidered pillow. Wasn't he very arrogant just now? Why can't he be now?" Jun Zueji, who was on the Sky Sword platform, had already been left far behind by Heartless and Gui Jiaozi. Heartless and Gui Jiaozi had already reached the fifth sky, while Jun Zueji was still at the third sky. This scene made the Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren feel very relieved. "You two, what's the rush?" Lu Mu of course heard their words. He smiled coldly and said, "This is only the beginning. It's not certain who will be able to reach the end." "Is that so?" The Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren looked at each other and laughed, then ridiculed. "Then we'll just have to wait and see the wonderful performance of that sword chief in the sky. Let's wait and see." Lu Mu smiled faintly. He was very confident in Jun Zueji. This time, the Yu King Sword sect recruited Jun Zueji. Not only did they give the latter a huge benefit, they also completely offended the sword martial artist in the sky. A sword martial artist in the sky was naturally not worth mentioning. The most important thing was that behind the sword martial artist in the sky was a huge monster. The Yu King Sword sect did not hesitate to do this because they fancied Jun Zueji's super talent. Of course, Lu Mu knew that Jun Zueji had not used his full strength yet, so he was not in a hurry. The moment Jun Zueji used his full strength, it would definitely shock everyone. Following that, the swordsmen on the sword platform in the sky all slowed down. Everyone's sword intent was almost exhausted. It was obviously impossible for them to maintain their original speed. First Guardian Lord, looking at Heartless and Gui Jiaozi's speed, "I'm afraid they will break the record of the sky." Eternally Merciless looked at the two tallest figures on the sword platform in the sky and said with a frown. Zhong Mingyu nodded, his face was gloomy, and he did not say a word. The fastest record to reach the top of the 9 heavens in the sky was 9 days. And now, only half a day had passed, and Heartless and Gui Jiaozi had already reached the 5th heaven. Their speed was so fast that it was shocking. Even if their speed slowed down, they would still be able to reach the top of the sky within 9 days. If Heartless and Gui Jiaozi both broke the record of the sky, then the sword martial artist in the sky would undoubtedly lose all face. However, Zhong Mingyu was not worried about Heartless and Gui Jiaozi. He was more worried about Jun Zueji. He had watched Jun Zueji grow up, and knew how terrifying the latter's talent was. Jun Zueji was currently under Heartless and Gui Jiaozi, and was only deliberately suppressing his sword intent. When Jun Zueji erupted, he would quickly surpass the two of them. If the top three of the sky firmament were to be taken away by other forces, then the sword martial artist in the sky would lose a lot of face. In the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. On the sword platform in the sky, the speed of the swordsmen was even slower. Many of them even stopped and began to recover their strength. When the sword seed in the sky grew to a certain height, it would become more and more difficult to grow any further. And the swordsman's sword intent was also almost exhausted. They had to recover before they could continue. At this moment, most of the swordsmen had already reached the third heaven of the sky firmament. And at the highest point, Heartless and Gui Jiaozi had already reached the seventh heaven. Ha ha! Heartless and Gui Jiaozi are about to reach the eighth heaven. How can that brat Jun Zueji catch up? Absolute Eagle King laughed wildly. His aura was extremely arrogant. Some people want us to wait and see. Could it be that they want to see how Jun Zueji will lose? Gui Tongren also sneered, looking at Lu Mu with a face full of contempt. Jun Zueji, what are you waiting for? Lu Mu's face was gloomy as he looked at Jun Zueji on the sword platform in the sky. Boom. But at this time, Jun Zueji's body suddenly released a terrifying aura. Immediately, a huge sword intent was released, shaking the void. The swordsmen in the vicinity of dozens of meters were affected by the impact, and all began to sway. Following that, a powerful sword intent was released and poured into the sword seed in the sky beneath Jun Zueji's feet. Boom! 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 The sword seed in the sky was stimulated by the sword intent and instantly became berserk. With a loud bang, a terrifying aura filled the air. Chapter 3378. Unstoppable Jun Zueji. His speed has become faster. Everyone on and outside the Sky Sword Discourse Arena saw the sword seed under Jun Zueji's feet suddenly explode, and their eyes couldn't help but tremble with excitement. Many people had even forgotten that Jun Zueji was no longer a member of the Sky Sword Martial Sect, but a member of the Yu King Sword Sect. Boom! Jun Zueji stood on top of the sword seed in the sky, his entire body surging with a huge sword intent aura. It was extremely terrifying, making it seem as if his entire body had fused with the sword seed in the sky beneath his feet. Under the stimulation of the sword intent, the sword seed in the sky crazily grew at an extremely fast speed. Everyone's eyes trembled, especially those swordsmen on the sword discourse arena in the sky, who could clearly feel the vibrations in the space. Jun Zueji was indeed worthy of being the former sword chief in the sky. After his sword intent was released, that kind of imposing manner was simply too terrifying, like a rainbow, sharp and unstoppable. Next, under the gaze of countless eyes, Jun Zueji's figure shot straight into the sky. The fifth heaven, the sixth heaven, the seventh heaven. In just the blink of an eye, Jun Zueji had actually directly climbed from the fourth heaven of the sky vault to the seventh heaven. His speed was too fast, causing people to feel shocked and fearful at the same time. How could a swordsman's talent be so terrifying? However, after entering the seventh heaven, Jun Zueji's speed dropped, and he still couldn't catch up to Heartless and Gui Jiaozi. When Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren saw this scene, they let out a long breath of impure air, and their hearts calmed down a lot. Jun Zueji, your strength is not limited to this. However, on the other side, Zhong Mingyu's eyes trembled as he muttered. Based on his understanding of Jun Zueji, the latter's strength and talent should be even more terrifying. Jun Zueji, don't let this elder down. Lu Mu's eyes trembled as he said nervously in his heart. His forehead was covered in beads of sweat, and it was obvious that he was extremely nervous. Today, I, Jun Zueji, will not only be the first to reach the top of the sky dome of heaven, but I will also create a record that will never be surpassed by future generations. At this time, Jun Zueji's voice resounded. In the next moment, a shadow of a sword appeared around his body. The surrounding space started to tremble and the power of the heavens and earth started to collapse towards him. Hua, hua, hua. Then, a strange scene occurred. The sword will in the surrounding space was absorbed by the sword will outside of Jun Zueji's body. Then, it flowed into the sword seed in the sky beneath his feet. Boom! Under the impact of the sword intent, the sword seed in the sky beneath Jun Zueji's feet began to grow frantically. At this moment, Jun Zueji's figure was like a sharp sword that extended into the sky. The sharpness of his aura seemed as though it could tear through everything. His speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he had surpassed Heartless and Gue Jiaozi and entered the 8th heaven of the sky. Jun Zueji is so terrifying. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them with trembling eyes. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Jun Zueji was too strong. After being silent for such a long time, he had actually surpassed Heartless and Gue Jiaozi in one fell swoop. In the competition of the sky, geniuses competed against each other. Only the most monstrous geniuses could blossom with the most dazzling light. Obviously, at this moment, Jun Zueji was the most dazzling light. Heartless and Gue Jiaozi were left behind. Their expressions were very ugly. The corner of Heartless' eyes twitched a few times. It seemed as though he wanted to open his blindfold, but after thinking for a moment, he gave up. It didn't matter who reached the top of the sky dome of heaven first. It wasn't worth opening his blindfold. Gue Jiaozi's face was gloomy. He couldn't help but look at his left arm, as though he was calculating something. On his left arm, there was a powerful sword seal. If he opened it, he would definitely surpass Jun Zueji. However, he still endured it. It wasn't good to reveal his trump card so early. At this time, Jun Zueji's figure had already reached the top of the 8th heaven. However, his speed had also slowed down once again. Phew! Outside the sword discourse arena in the sky, Lu Mu let out a long sigh and said in his heart, Jun Zueji, you really didn't disappoint this elder. Jun Zueji slowed down, but he only needed half a day to reach the top of the 9th heaven. It was only 5.5 days now. If Jun Zueji reached the top of the 9th heaven in half a day, he would have created a new record, reaching the top of the sky dome of heaven in 6 days. The previous record of reaching the top of the sky dome of heaven was 9 days. Jun Zueji only spent 6 days to directly shorten the record by a third. When the crowd saw that Jun Zueji's speed had slowed down, they calmed down a little. However, shock was written on everyone's face. It seemed that the first person to reach the top of the sky dome of heaven would undoubtedly be Jun Zueji. Hey! Look, what is that guy doing? At this time, someone suddenly discovered something. He pointed at a figure on the sword discourse arena in the sky and shouted. The crowd turned their gazes and noticed that there was actually another figure on the sword discourse arena in the sky dome of heaven. It was as if this figure had never moved from the moment he stepped onto the sword discourse arena in the sky dome. It's that brat! In the next moment, everyone immediately recognized the person. They cried out in alarm and immediately burst into laughter. The person who was still at the first heaven was none other than Ye Tian. Ye Tian was a famous person in the Sky Sword Martial School. Almost everyone knew him. However, Jun Zueji, Heartless, Gue Jiaozi and the others didn't know him at all. His cultivation was very low and his strength was weak. Among the 10,000 or so swordsmen in the Sky Dome, he was the most inconspicuous. Of course, he couldn't enter the eyes of Jun Zueji and the others. However, those who knew him were puzzled and amused at the same time. Nye Tian had previously displayed shocking talent, so why was he still stuck at the first heaven? What the hell is Nye Tian doing? Doesn't he plan to climb to the top of the sky dome of heaven? Is he just trying to be funny? This guy, wasn't he very powerful before? Even Yang Bingxian, who was ranked third on the Sky Sword list, was killed by him. Why is he so quiet now? Look, he's sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. He can't be cultivating, right? This guy might really be cultivating, but now that it's time to climb the sky dome of heaven, he's actually cultivating. Does he not understand the situation? The crowd looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help but discuss. Their expressions became even more puzzled. Nie Tian was sitting cross-legged on top of the sword seed in the sky dome of heaven. It was obvious that he was cultivating. But cultivating at this time, wasn't it a joke? Idiot. Heartless and Gui Jiaozi couldn't help but look at Nie Tian. They laughed cold and directly regarded Nie Tian as a clown. Cultivating in the sky dome of heaven, if this wasn't an idiot, then what was? Nie Tian, what the hell are you doing? Outside the sword discourse arena, Zhong Mingyu looked at Nie Tian, clearly unable to remain calm as he said with a frown. Although he didn't expect Nie Tian to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Jun Zueji and the others, he should at least be much stronger than an ordinary swordsman. And now, Nie Tian was calmly cultivating there. What was this? Zhong Mingyu, the swordsmen of your Sky Sword martial sect are really strange. At this time, the absolute Eagle King sneered and said, "First there was a traitor, and now there's an idiot. How laughable!" The traitor was, of course, Jun Zueji, and the idiot was Nie Tian. Chapter 3379. Nie Tian exploded. Boom! A terrifying sword force was released from Nie Tian's body, charging into the void. It was as majestic as a mountain, vast and terrifying. This is... When the crowd saw this scene, their expressions changed. After a moment of shock, they reacted. Nie Tian had broken through. That's right, Nie Tian, who had been cultivating on the sword discourse arena in the sky for 5 days, had actually broken through. The crowd was stunned, their eyes filled with disbelief. Who would have thought that Nie Tian would actually achieve a breakthrough in the way of the sword after cultivating on the sword discourse arena in the sky for 5 days? At the late stage of the sword Tao, every step forward was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. However, Nie Tian had actually broken through in 5 days. This was too unbelievable. At this moment, the swordsmen on the sword discourse arena in the sky were all stunned. They looked at Nie Tian as if they were looking at a monster. In their eyes, Nie Tian was no different from a monster. Only a monster could break through in 5 days. Outside the sword discourse arena in the sky, everyone's expressions were sluggish and incomparably shocked. Especially Zhong Mingyu, eternally merciless, Sixth Sky, and the others, who were even more shocked. They all knew that Nie Tian had just broken through to the divine sword body realm not long ago, and now, he had actually broken through again. This was too terrifying. Just how abnormal was Nie Tian to be able to achieve a breakthrough in the sword realm in 5 days? At this moment, Nie Tian opened his eyes, and a sharp light suddenly appeared. His entire body was like an unsheathed sword, incomparably sharp. He stood up, and the corner of his mouth pulled into a faint smile. The reason why he was able to break through in such a short period of time, other than his own terrifying talent, there were 2 more important reasons: the shackles of the heavenly Tao and the eternal night demon fox. The sky in the sky was filled with the sword intent of heaven and earth. This sword intent was connected to the power of the heavenly Tao, so it was very easy for Nie Tian to absorb. And the eternal night demon fox and Nie Tian's divine sense were connected, allowing his understanding and comprehension of the sword intent of heaven and earth to far surpass that of ordinary people. These 2 points allowed him to achieve a breakthrough. The reason why he had forcefully broken through was because he knew that a huge battle was waiting for him. With the strength of his ultimate god sword body, it would be easy for him to fight against other swordsmen. However, it was impossible for him to fight against Heartless and Ghost Charming. As for Jun Zueji, that was even more impossible. Therefore, he had to break through in order to stand a chance against these three people. He's just an ant, so what if he broke through? Gui Jiao sneered at Nie Tian with disdain. It was obvious that he did not take Nie Tian seriously at all. Boom. However, at this moment, Nie Tian's horn twitched. Instantly, a powerful sword force gushed out from his body and shot up into the sky. Its aura was tyrannical, like a dragon breaking out of the abyss, rising and roaring. At this moment, the entire void trembled, as though it had been struck by something horrifying. Following this, the sword seed in the sky under Nie Tian's feet began to grow rapidly, like a giant tree rising from the ground. The crowd was stunned. They couldn't believe their eyes. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian had actually rushed to the second heaven. How is this possible? The others were stunned. Their faces were filled with fear as they cried out in alarm. The speed that Nie Tian was displaying was simply too fast. It was even faster than Jun Zueji's. Just as Nie Tian's figure soared into the sky, the entire sky sword discourse arena trembled, as though it was very excited. How can this brat's speed be so fast? Gui Jiao was shocked as he let out a strange cry. This time, even Jun Zueji, who was at the highest point, slightly raised his eyebrows. His expression was somewhat ugly. He actually felt a trace of threat from Nie Tian. Immediately after, Nie Tian's figure continued to rise, and his speed did not slow down at all. Instead, it became faster and faster. Nie Tian's figure moved as though he was flying. Sword intent continuously surged out from his body. Moreover, the aura of these sword intents were actually different. Within Nie Tian's body, there were originally several different sword intents. Proud sword intent, star sword intent, thunderbolt sword intent, soul-devouring sword intent, and 3 evil sword intent. At this moment, when he used different sword intents to stimulate the sword seed in the sky, it actually had an unexpected effect. If it was only one type of sword intent, the growth rate of the sword seed in the sky wouldn't be able to be maintained for long. However, if there were several types of sword intent, they would be able to maintain the growth rate of the sword seed in the sky. The growth rate of the sword seed in the sky beneath Nie Tian's feet increased. In just a short moment, under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, his figure had actually rushed to the 6th heaven. Moreover, after reaching the 6th heaven, his speed still showed no signs of slowing down. This is too terrifying. Everyone's eyes trembled as the shock in their hearts was indescribable. Zhong Mingyu and the other experts naturally saw through the clues. They never thought that there would be so many sword intents in Nie Tian's body. It was already very rare for an ordinary swordsman to have 2 types of sword intents in his body. This was because if there were too many types of sword intents, their attributes would clash, and it would be very difficult to truly perfectly fuse them together. However, there were no such signs in Nie Tian's body at all. It was unbelievable that Nie Tian could actually perfectly fuse 5 types of sword intents at the same time. Actually, the reason why Nie Tian could do this was because of the star origin stone in his body and the tolerance of the power of the stars. Zhong Mingyu looked at Nie Tian and the corners of his mouth involuntarily curled up as hope ignited in his heart. He originally thought that this time, the Sky Swordsman was going to embarrass himself. He did not expect that Nie Tian would suddenly emerge as a new force. This kid is a monster. The Absolute Eagle King looked at Nie Tian, his old face contorted as he said solemnly. He did not expect that a swordsman that he did not even bother to look at would actually give him such a huge shock. Lu Mu was also stunned. He even felt that Nie Tian's talent was above Jun Zueji's. After entering the 6th level of heaven, Nie Tian's speed slowed down a little. The crowd breathed a sigh of relief. They thought that Nie Tian's outburst had ended. It's time to use my true sword intent. However, at this moment, the corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as a wave of sword intent surged out of his body. It was actually a completely different aura. He had fused the 5 types of sword intents with the demon god's power, and used the demon god's sword intent. The demon god's sword intent was his true sword intent. And at this moment, he began to release the power of the Sky Evolution Saint Spirit. The Sky Evolution Saint Spirit's sword intent was stimulated to the extreme, finally breaking through the limit and allowing his sword principal realm to reach the realm of sword rhythm. The crowd looked at this scene and felt the aura of Nie Tian's sword intent. They were all stunned and completely dumbfounded. The crowd found it hard to believe that a swordsman's sword principal realm would suddenly increase in an instant. And at this moment, Nie Tian actually revealed a completely different sword intent. And the aura of this sword intent was far more terrifying than the previous sword intents. What kind of monster was Nie Tian? And on the sword platform, the swordsmen were all stunned. Chapter 3380. Chapter 375. Ascending to the heavens. Just as the crowd was in a state of extreme shock, a shocking scene occurred. Boom! Within Nie Tian's body, an earth-shattering sword will erupted and frantically rushed into the sword seed in the sky beneath his feet. In an instant, the sword seed in the sky seemed to have gone berserk. Like a ferocious wild beast, it frantically extended towards the heavens. Waves of terrifying sword will filled the surrounding space. At this moment, Nie Tian was like an incomparably sharp sword, its sharpness unparalleled, tearing apart everything in its path. The strength of Nie Tian's sword will and his talent in sword Dao were perfectly displayed through the sword seed in the sky. The crowd was completely stunned. Their faces were blank as they stared in disbelief at the figure soaring into the sky. At this moment, the speed at which Nie Tian's figure ascended increased once again. The 7th layer of heaven. The 8th layer of heaven. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian's figure had actually arrived at the 8th layer of heaven and was rapidly approaching Jun Zueji. Jun Zueji felt a terrifying sword will aura rushing towards him, causing his eyes to involuntarily tremble. It was only at this moment that he came to his senses. No. The first person to ascend to the heavens in the sky should be me, Jun Zueji. Jun Zueji came to his senses. His face was incomparably furious as he screamed madly in his heart. He had already reached the peak of the 8th layer of heaven and was only 1 step away from the 9th layer of heaven. At this time, how could he allow anyone to take away the glory that belonged to him? He must be the first to ascend to the heavens in the sky. Jun Zueji frowned. His body erupted with a terrifying power, causing his sword will to instantly soar. Blood meridian power. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He immediately sensed that Jun Zueji had actually used the blood meridian power to stimulate his sword will. Boom! Jun Zueji's sword will soared crazily. The sword seed in the sky under his feet suddenly grew even faster. But unfortunately, it was already too late. Nie Tian's speed had reached its limit. The distance between him and Jun Zueji was getting closer and closer. 50 meters, 30 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters. Under the attention of countless pairs of eyes, Nie Tian's figure, in an instant, was running neck and neck with Jun Zueji. The sky sword seed beneath Jun Zueji's feet was still growing faster, but unfortunately, it was still slower than Nie Tian's. Sorry, I won't wait for you. When Nie Tian passed by Jun Zueji, the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. It was extremely sarcastic and provocative. Jun Zueji's pupils shrank, and his entire body erupted with anger. He looked like an angry rooster. However, he had nowhere to vent. Nie Tian's figure had actually surpassed him. At this time, Nie Tian arrived below the 9th heaven. He raised his palm and touched the 9th heaven. Buzz! Right at this moment, the entire sword discourse arena in the sky seemed to have sensed something and trembled. Everyone's eyes trembled, and their faces were filled with horror. However, Nie Tian did not care. His figure moved and directly soared into the sky. With a step, he steadily stood on the 9th heaven. This scene caused everyone's eyes to tremble violently. In the next moment, they were all petrified and froze on the spot. Nye Tian had actually stepped onto the ninth heaven in the sky. Moreover, he was the first swordsman to step onto the ninth heaven. He was one step ahead of Jun Zueji, and had created a terrifying record. However, these were not the things that shocked everyone the most. The most terrifying thing about Nye Tian was that he had done it in one go, without any pause. From the first heaven, he had directly stepped into the ninth heaven. If Nye Tian had been at the Supreme God Profound Realm from the beginning, then he would have only used less than half an hour to reach the top of the sky. This kind of record was something that no one could surpass. The current Nye Tian could only be described with 4 words: terrifying. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Nye Tian. It turned out that in this competition in the sky, Nye Tian was the most dazzling light. Nye Tian was above the ninth heaven. He let out a light breath, and the corner of his mouth raised into a faint smile. In fact, the reason why he could set foot on the ninth layer of heaven at such an abnormal speed was not only because of his terrifying sword will, but also because he had the shackles of the way of heaven and earth in his body, which were similar to the sword will of heaven and earth in Haotian firmament. But no matter what, he had created a terrifying record that shocked the world. Outside the sword discourse arena in the sky, the people who had been stunned for a long time finally reacted. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tong Ren's expressions were extremely ugly, turning from green to white. They looked at Nye Tian with sinister and vicious eyes, as if they wanted to skin Nye Tian alive. As for Lu Mu, his face was gloomy. His eyes were locked onto Nye Tian's body. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry, and no one knew what he was thinking. Zhong Mingyu, eternally merciless, and the others, on the other hand, had faces full of shock and joy. They were so excited that they were about to jump up. Zhong Mingyu was looking forward to Nye Tian's eruption, but he never would have thought that after Nye Tian's eruption of power, it would far exceed his expectations. The other swordsmen of the sword martial competition in the sky seemed to be boiling, their eyes shining brightly. Nye Tian! Nye Tian! Nye Tian! In the next moment, the entire arena was filled with tsunami-like shouts, resounding through the sky and shaking the void. Only Yang Gengri's face was taut, and he actually felt some lingering fear in his heart. At this moment, he understood why Zhong Mingyu would personally protect Nye Tian. Nye Tian's terror had exceeded any predictions. However, Nye Tian stood in the ninth heaven with a calm expression. He raised his head and looked up into the sky, as if he was sensing something. He still remembered that the swordsman who reached the top of the sky firmament had the chance to obtain the heart of the sky. However, at this moment, he did not see the heart of the sky firmament. As a matter of fact, the heart of the sky firmament was only a legend of the sword martial competition in the sky firmament. According to the rumors, the person who obtained the heart of the sky would become the master of the sky. However, no one in the entire sword martial competition in the sky firmament had ever seen the heart of the sky firmament. Even Zhong Mingyu had not seen the heart of the sky firmament after reaching the top of the sky firmament. It was said that only those who were recognized by the heart of the sky firmament could trigger the resonance of the heart of the sky firmament and draw out the heart of the sky firmament. However, after so long, no one had been able to trigger the resonance of the heart of the sky firmament. Nye Tian, what did you find? The Ghost Emperor's voice was heard all of a sudden. Nye Tian frowned and fell silent for a moment before he said, I sense that there seems to be some kind of rune energy surging in the space here. The flow of these runes seems to be following a certain pattern, and they are all converging in a certain place. As he spoke, Nye Tian looked up into the sky and his expression changed. He could see that there seemed to be another space in the sky. Could it be? Nye Tian frowned and his expression changed as he thought to himself, there's a 10th heaven above the 9th heaven firmament in the sky firmament. This thought made him frown, and he was instantly dumbfounded. "Brat, you're dead." But at this moment, a low murderous voice rang out and a silhouette appeared in the ninth heaven. Chapter 3381. Arrogant and overbearing. Jun Zueji stepped onto the ninth heaven of the vast heavens, and let out a fierce roar. His eyes were filled with intense killing intent as he fixed his gaze on Nietian, like a ferocious beast that was about to devour him. Nietian frowned as he sensed a chilly aura coming at him. He spun around and saw Jun Zueji. "Nietian, right?" Jun Zueji's eyes flashed with a cold light as he stared at Nietian. His whole body was filled with killing intent. The first person to reach the top of the sky should have been him, but this glory had been snatched away by Nietian. How could he not be angry? "What do you want?" Nietianling laughed. He did not show any fear. Instead, he thought it was ridiculous. He did not understand why Jun Zueji was so angry and full of killing intent. "I want to kill you." Jun Zueji's mouth twitched as he spat out the word coldly. His whole body was surging with a strong killing intent. "I have no enmity with you, why do you want to kill me?" Nietian frowned, feeling a little strange. "The first person to reach the top of the sky should be me, and only me." Jun Zueji said coldly, "You took away the glory that belonged to me, so you deserve to die." "Your glory?" Nietian was stunned for a moment, then said coldly, "Everyone can reach the top of the sky. As for who the first person to reach the top is, of course, whoever has the strength can reach the top. According to what you said, you can only be the first to reach the top. Then if you can't reach the top, everyone else will have to wait for you? Ridiculous." After saying that, Nietian's eyes flashed with ridicule. He did not even bother to look at Jun Zueji. He had seen many arrogant and overbearing people like Jun Zueji. Each and every one of them thought they were the best in the world. They even wished they could walk on 3 legs. They were really ridiculous, like idiots. "Do you think you're stronger than me?" Jun Zueji sneered and said in a deep voice, "I, Jun Zueji, have always been number 1. In the sky sword martial arts, I am the sword chief in the sky. Therefore, in this year's martial arts competition in the sky, only I can be the first. So now that I'm the first to reach the top of the sky, you want to kill me?" Nietianling laughed and asked, "Those who stand in my way must die." Jun Zueji laughed coldly as a cold glint flashed in his eyes. His silhouette flickered as a long sword appeared in his hands, emitting a dazzling light that shot towards Nietian. Nietian frowned. He took a step forward and moved in an instant, dodging the sword light. Jun Zueji steadied himself and his face darkened. He hadn't expected that Jun Zueji would actually attack him. Jun Zueji quickly stopped. This sudden scene stunned everyone. Zhong Mingyu reacted and shouted in a deep voice. However, Jun Zueji didn't care at all. Instead, his attacks became even more swift and fierce. Sword after sword stabbed towards Nietian. Nietian dodged several sword attacks in succession, but he was forced into a perilous situation by Jun Zueji and was about to be unable to resist. In the sky, the strength of the martial artists was suppressed. Even their blood vessels and yuan meridians were suppressed. Only their sword intent was not suppressed. Nietian's sword Dao realm was much weaker than Jun Zueji's. In addition, Jun Zueji's sudden attack caught Nietian off guard. Therefore, Nietian was forced into a passive position. "Die for me." At this time, Jun Zueji madly attacked with his sword. A sword shadow whizzed out, causing the void to tremble. Nietian frowned and the starlight heaven beheader appeared in his hand. He hastily stabbed out with his sword. 2 sword shadows collided in the void and set off a huge wave. It was as if a terrifying vortex had exploded. Bang! In the next moment, a muffled sound rang out. Nietian's figure was sent flying. After he stabilized himself, he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Damn it!" Zhong Mingyu saw this scene and growled. He couldn't wait to rush into the sky. Zhong Mingyu, the two of them are just exchanging pointers. Why are you so nervous? On the other side, Lu Mu's figure arrived. His eyes were suffused with a poisonous light as they locked onto Zhong Mingyu. This is exchanging pointers? Zhong Mingyu roared. He was about to go berserk. Lu Mu said it casually, but anyone could see that Jun Ziji clearly wanted to kill Nie Tian. Has Jun Ziji gone mad? The eyes of the crowd trembled as they looked at Jun Zueji. Originally, after the Sky was the real martial arts competition, who would have thought that Jun Ziji couldn't wait any longer and wanted to kill Nie Tian? What does it matter if it's exchanging pointers or not? At this time, Absolute Eagle King sneered and said, "Who said that killing in the sky can't be done? Brother Ju is right." On the other side, Gui Tongren also sneered and said, "He's just a transcendent profound meaning swordsman. If he dies, then he dies. Why are you so nervous?" "You." Zhong Mingyu's face was gloomy. His eyes were spewing flames of anger. These old things were too shameless. They clearly felt threatened by Nie Tian and wanted to use despicable means to kill Nie Tian. Boom! In the 9th layer of heaven, Jun Zueji slashed out with his sword. Sword images roared and surged. A terrifying aura swept through the void, causing the surrounding space to violently tremble. Nie Tian's face was gloomy. Starry sky slashed out, causing the void to rumble. Rumble! Two sword images collided. A terrifying power surged out, wreaking havoc in the void. It was as if space itself was about to explode. Nie Tian and Jun Zueji retreated dozens of meters at the same time. But on Nie Tian's body there was a new wound. Blood flowed out incessantly. In the sky, he couldn't even use his bloodline power. His wound was healing very slowly. Nie Tian, the sky suppresses all other powers except sword intent. Let me see how much more blood you can bleed. Jun Zueji sneered when he saw that Nie Tian was seriously injured. Then, the sword intent around his body became even more terrifying, and his aura became even more vigorous and fierce. Boom! The instant his voice faded, he slashed out with his sword. An enormous sword intent condensed into a sword image in the void, blasting towards Nie Tian. Without the support of the martial body, even if the sword intent wasn't suppressed, the power it could unleash would be greatly weakened. But the power of this sword was almost fatal to Nie Tian and Nie Tian. After all, Jun Zueji was a swordsman at the first heaven of the Oracle realm, while Nie Tian was only at the transcendent esoteric realm. Even if he forcibly used the power of the divine evolution Saint Spirit, he would only be at the sword rhyme realm. Such a huge gap in sword principle could not be made up for by any talent. If Jun Zueji and Nie Tian were swordsmen at the same realm, Nie Tian would definitely not be afraid. But now Nie Tian's sword intent was indeed not as good as Jun Zueji's. 9 limits of the starry sky, destruction of the sun. Nie Tian let out a low roar. Immediately, sword intent surged around him, and a terrifying sword shadow whizzed out like a raging dragon to confront Jun Zueji. Rumble! In the next moment, the two sword images collided. The void suddenly trembled, as if the 9th heaven was about to collapse. Bang! Then, with a muffled sound, Nie Tian's figure retreated hundreds of meters. After he stabilized his body, there was another terrifying wound on his body. Nie Tian. However, at this moment, 2 cold voices rang out at almost the same time. Chapter 3382. Chapter 3377. The 10th layer Zhu Qing and Gui Jiao stepped onto the 9th layer of heaven. Their eyes were cold and filled with killing intent as they locked onto Nie Tian. Oh no! Nie Tian frowned and his expression darkened. How could he not see that Zhu Qing and Gui Jiao also had killing intent towards him at this moment? Jun Zueji alone was enough to overwhelm him. If Zhu Qing and Gui Jiao were to join the fray, only death awaited him. Let the 3 of us attack together and kill this kid. At this time, Gui Jiao sneered, and a strange black longsword appeared in his hand. Suddenly, the air was filled with a strong aura of death. All right. The corner of Zhu Qing's mouth twitched coldly. These three guys are too despicable. Everyone shouted when they saw this scene. Jun Zueji, Zhu Qing, and Gui Jiao could be said to be the three strongest people in the competition in the sky. At this moment, the three of them actually joined forces to kill Nie Tian. Nie Tian must enter the 10th layer of heaven. Nie Tian's face was gloomy. At this time, the voice of the Ghost Emperor sounded in his divine sense. It seems that there really is a 9th layer of heaven in the sky. Nie Tian couldn't help but stare at the sky with a fiery gaze. With his current strength, it was simply impossible to fight against Jun Zueji and the other two at the same time. Although he didn't know what was in the 10th layer of heaven, entering it was his only chance of survival. At this time, the voice of the Ghost Emperor sounded again to remind Nie Tian, there is a seal in the 10th layer of heaven. You must break the seal to enter the 10th layer of heaven. Seal. Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he looked at the sky. His divine sense spread out to perceive everything in the void. With the help of the eternal night fox, his perception ability became extremely terrifying. At this moment, he saw that the void was filled with runes condensed from sword intent, and the place where these runes gathered was a huge vortex of sword intent. That is the eye of the ceiling. Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he stared at the vortex of sword intent. The Ghost Emperor also sensed it and said excitedly, "Break the eye of the seal, and you can enter the 10th heaven." Nie Tian nodded his head heavily, his gaze sweeping over Jun Zueji and the other two, his expression becoming gloomy. "Nie Tian, you're dead." Jun Zueji smiled coldly and his figure moved. Sword intent gushed out from his whole body and he roared loudly, "You dare to steal the glory that belongs to me, Jun Zueji, you deserve to die." Boom. Hua hua hua. As the sound of his voice faded, Jun Zueji violently slashed out with his sword. A sword shadow appeared, then 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 4, 4 turned into 8. In an instant, a net of sword shadows formed in the air, roaring as it pressed down on Nie Tian. Die. At the same time, Zhu Qing and Gui Jiao also made their move. 2 terrifying sword shadows whizzed out and attacked Nie Tian. 3 powerhouses, 2 at the 9th heaven of swordplay, and 1 at the 1st heaven of oracle, were attacking a transcendent esoteric swordsman at the same time. How could the latter block it? At this moment, everyone's eyes trembled violently, and they all gasped as they looked at the 9th heaven in the sky in horror. Zhong Mingyu, eternally merciless, and the others' hearts were in their throats, and they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Nie Tian was on the verge of death. How could he not be nervous? Especially Zhong Mingyu. He knew that Nie Tian's identity was extraordinary, and he couldn't let anything happen to him. Boom. At this moment, Nie Tian's body suddenly shook, and a terrifying sword aura shot up into the sky, like the roar of a dragon, shaking the void. The next moment, the sword intent around his body suddenly surged, becoming extremely terrifying. The realm of swordplay. Everyone's eyes trembled, and they exclaimed. Nie Tian's swordsmanship had once again broken through to the realm of swordplay. It was hard to imagine what kind of terrifying power Nie Tian's body contained. So what if it's the realm of swordplay? He will still die. Jun Zueji was stunned at first, but then he roared, the murderous intent in his eyes becoming stronger. The stronger Nie Tian's strength was, the more determined he was to kill him. He would never allow anyone who was a threat to him to live. Zhu Qing and Gui Jiao were also stunned. They didn't expect that Nie Tian had a power in his body that was not suppressed by the firmament in the sky. It was too terrifying. At this moment, Nie Tian was using the power of the Heaven Evolution Saint Soul. The Sky Evolution Saint Spirit was not immune to the suppression of the void, But the Sky Evolution Saint Spirit was an Archean Saint Spirit after all, and it was very powerful, so the suppression was relatively small. If the Sky Evolution Saint Spirit was not suppressed, Nie Tian could easily kill Jun Zueji and the others with just the power of the Saint Spirit. Saint Heaven-defying sword, earth and man as one, stars and moons sink. In the next moment the corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, and he slashed out with his sword. At the same time, he took a step forward, and his figure rushed towards the void. Boom! The sword shadows whistled out, galloping like a giant beast, and the pressure caused the void to tremble, as if it was about to collapse. Rumble! After that, the four terrifying forces clashed against each other, causing the entire space to tremble violently. Terrifying waves of energy rippled out as the power within the sword will was completely unleashed. In an instant, the destructive force was so strong that it seemed as though it wanted to destroy everything. Bang! Nie Tian was in midair, and he activated the Astral Soul Shield. After being hit by the waves of sword intent, his entire body was sent flying, and a bloody trajectory appeared in the air. On the other hand, Jun Zueji and the others were unmoved, like boulders in the midst of a violent storm. Nie Tian. Zhong Mingyu was shocked by the scene in front of him, and his eyes trembled. He was so scared that his face turned pale, and he directly cried out. And below the Sky Sword Discourse Arena, Nie Fenghua, Bailey Xingxue and the others were stunned, and their mouths were wide open, but they were speechless. Under the joint attack of Jun Zueji, Heartless, and Gue Jiaozi, would Nie Tian still have a chance to survive? The expressions of the crowd also changed. Their expressions were complicated, and their eyes were trembling. The people of the Sky Sword Discourse Arena looked down on Nie Tian before, but now Nie Tian was the greatest hope of the Sky Sword Discourse Arena. Break for me! At this time, Nie Tian's figure moved, and directly stabilized himself. Then, he suddenly turned around, and pierced out towards the void behind him. The eyes of the crowd trembled, first with joy, then with doubt. They didn't know what Nie Tian was doing at this time. Boom! In the next moment, under the gaze of countless eyes, a strange scene appeared. The void trembled, and then a crack appeared. Then, waves of sword intent runes surged out, and instantly enveloped Nie Tian. Then, an even more strange scene occurred. The sword intent rune was like a giant hand, directly pulling Nie Tian into the crack in the void. Boom! Then, the void trembled again, and a terrifying force spread out, forming a layer of halo. Chapter 3383. The Heart of the Sky, What's Going On? Seeing that another layer of light had appeared above the 9th layer of heaven, the crowd couldn't help but gasp in shock. Weren't there only 9 layers of heaven in the sky? Why was there another layer of light? What was even more bizarre was that Nie Tian actually entered the layer of light. His entire body was shrouded in runes of sword intent, and a terrifying aura of sword intent spread out in the air. Could this be? Zhong Mingyu's expression froze. His voice trembled, but he couldn't say a word. First Protector, what's going on? Eternally Merciless looked at Zhong Mingyu and couldn't help but ask. That should be the legendary clear firmament 10th heaven. Zhong Mingyu said in a low voice after taking a deep breath and calming down a little. The 10th layer of heaven. Eternally Merciless' eyes trembled and he almost screamed out loud. The next moment, he thought of something and became petrified. The appearance of the 10th layer of heaven meant that the heart of the sky was about to appear. There was a legend among the blade masters in the sky. Only when the 10th layer of heaven appeared in the sky, would the heart of the sky appear. Now that the 10th layer of heaven had appeared, didn't that mean that the heart of the sky was about to appear as well? The heart of the sky, the most mysterious object of the blade masters in the sky, was finally about to appear. Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless' eyes were trembling. They knew that Nie Tian was extremely talented, but they didn't think that Nie Tian would be able to summon the 10th layer of heaven. The crowd stared at Nye Tian with shock written all over their faces. Damn it! Above the 9th layer of heaven, Jun Zueji stared at Nye Tian with a vicious look in his eyes. With a roar, he swung his sword towards the sky. He wanted to be like Nye Tian and enter the 10th layer of heaven. However, it was a pity that his sword was blocked by that layer of halo. Let's attack together. Gui Jiao's face sank as he looked at Heartless. All right. Heartless agreed. Sword shadows surged around his body, and a terrible black flame appeared outside his body, burning wildly in the void. Boom! Boom! In the next second, Zhu Qing and Gui Jiao attacked at the same time. 2 sword shadows soared into the sky toward the 10th level. However, after the 2 sword shadows landed, they disappeared into the layer of light like clay oxen entering the sea. That seemingly thin layer of light seemed to contain an endless amount of energy, capable of devouring all attacks. It was extremely strange. Jun Zueji and the others seemed to have gone mad as they continued to attack with their swords. However, all of their attacks were blocked by the halo of light. After a while, the 3 of them were tired. They looked at Nye Tian above the 10th layer of heaven with vicious eyes, as if he was their enemy. In fact, Nye Tian had no grudge against them. If there was anything, it was because Nye Tian's performance was too outstanding and stole their limelight. But at this time, no matter how much they hated Nye Tian, it was useless because they didn't even have the qualifications to step into the 10th layer of heaven. At the same time, above the 10th layer of heaven, Nye Tian's figure stood tall. His body was surging with incomparably violent sword intent runes. Nye Tian could feel that these sword intent runes contained a very large amount of power. Moreover, the aura was extremely violent and sharp like a blade, as if it could tear everything apart. However, these runes did not pose any threat to him. Instead, they slowly seeped into his martial body and turned into his own power. Could it be that these sword intent runes are the heart of the sky? Nye Tian frowned as he thought to himself in surprise. Then, after a while, these sword intent runes all entered Nye Tian's body. He could feel that his sword intent had obviously become much stronger. Nye Tian frowned as he felt the sword intent aura in the void. He did not know what would happen next. The crowd was also stunned. All eyes were focused on Nye Tian, afraid that they would miss something. Zhong Mingyu looked puzzled. Why did the 10th layer of heaven appear but the heart of the sky not appear? Boom! At that moment the entire firmament of the sky suddenly shook. Suddenly, the surrounding void began to shake as if the world was about to collapse. Then, a strange scene appeared. To his surprise, the bright lights in the vast heavens started to sway, and then started to flip and fold as they approached Nye Tian. This! The crowd's eyes were trembling. They had no idea what was happening. It was as if the entire firmament of the sky was bowing down to Nye Tian. This scene was too strange, and it caused one's heart to tremble with fear. No one knew what was going to happen next. Then, the layers of halos instantly formed into spherical halos that surrounded Nye Tian. Nye Tian was surrounded by 10 spherical halos, like a deity descending upon the world. Meanwhile, the swordsmen in the firmament of the sky were no longer suppressed by the forbidding aura. The sword seeds in the sky beneath their feet had also disappeared. They looked at Nye Tian, who was surrounded by the layers of halos, with trembling eyes. They did not know how to express their astonishment. The Master of the Sky has finally appeared. At that moment, a thunderous voice was heard. It was as if the heavens and earth had opened its mouth. The voice came from all directions, shocking everyone. The Master of the Sky. The crowd's expressions changed when they heard the name. They stared at Nye Tian in shock and fear. The Master of the Sky that the voice of the sky had mentioned was, of course, Nye Tian. The heart of the sky is really appearing. Zhong Mingyu's eyes trembled. His heart was about to jump out of his chest as he stared at Nye Tian with a fanatical gaze. Only the person who had merged with the heart of the sky would be the true master of the sky. Whoosh! 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 At that moment, the entire firmament of the sky began to shake. Layers of halos with dazzling light flowed and turned into streams of sword will in the sky, gathering toward the center. A moment later, Nye Tian was completely surrounded by the boundless sword will. His figure could not even be seen. The crowd could see that the sword will was becoming more and more condensed. It had actually formed a huge white ball of light outside of Nye Tian's body. This ball of light was condensed from the purest sword will. The sword will aura within it was extremely dense. That is, the heart of the sky. Zhong Mingyu's eyes trembled as he looked at the white ball of sword will. Even his voice was trembling. He was very sure that the white ball of light was the heart of the sky. That is the legendary heart of the sky? At the same time, Lu Mu's eyes trembled and he exclaimed in his heart. His eyes were filled with a cold light. Of course, he knew how precious the heart of the sky was. At that moment, the first thing that came to his mind was, I can't let Nye Tian get the heart of the sky. The heart of the sky should be mine. Attack! The next moment, Lu Mu's eyes narrowed and his figure moved. His entire body released a vast and boundless sword will aura. The terrifying force impacted the void. It was extremely terrifying. Chapter 3384. Chapter 379. The Lord of the Sky Boom. Floating in midair, Lu Mu was wreathed in sword intent. In the next moment, the terrifying sword intent of heavenly tribulation sword spread out in the void, morphed into raging waves of heavenly tribulation sword that bore down on Nye Tian with torrential momentum. The so-called heavenly disaster swords meant that a swordsman could use his sword will to condense the power of heavenly disaster. The power of heavenly disaster was 100 times more terrifying than ordinary sword will. It was not an exaggeration to say that the power of heavenly disaster could instantly kill dozens of swordsmen at the 9th heaven of Saint Realm. In order to snatch the heart of the sky, Lu Mu used the power of heavenly disaster. Oh no! Zhong Mingyu suddenly felt a fluctuation in the air. His eyes widened, and when he saw Lu Mu, he couldn't help but scream in his heart, his face filled with shock. He did not expect Lu Mu to make a move at this moment. He wanted to stop Lu Mu, but it was too late. In fact, even if he knew in advance, it was almost impossible to stop Lu Mu. After all, Lu Mu was a swordsman who had stepped into the Saint Realm. Zhong Mingyu, a mortal Saint Realm swordsman, could not compare to him. That person, what is he trying to do? The crowd finally came to their senses. They looked at Lu Mu with trembling eyes and could not help but exclaim, "Boom boom boom." At this moment, wherever Lu Mu's figure passed, the void rumbled, as though the space itself was about to be torn apart. The aura of his sword will was too terrifying. When it was released, it seemed as if it could destroy everything. Boom! In the next moment, a long sword appeared in Lu Mu's hand. He raised the sword with both hands and swung it wildly. Suddenly, the sword shadows around him condensed into a sword shadow that was close to 100,000 meters long. Its aura was so powerful that it seemed as if it could destroy everything in its path. Outside of the sword shadow, there was a layer of mysterious power. It was the power of heavenly disaster that he had condensed. In the sword martial artist in the sky, everyone's strength was suppressed to below the Saint Realm. Under such circumstances, the power of Lu Mu's sword could reach such a level. One could only imagine how strong he was. Bastard! Zhong Mingyu's eyes narrowed when he saw this scene and he roared in anger. He did not expect Lu Mu to be so ruthless. He had used all his strength in that one strike. It was clear that he wanted to kill Nye Tian as well. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren stared at the gigantic sword image in the sky, their expressions sluggish. At this moment, they couldn't help but rejoice at how wise it was to kneel earlier. If they had infuriated Lu Mu, the latter could have killed them instantly. Boom! In the next instant, the gigantic sword shadow descended and the power of the world was pushed away. It was as if a huge wave was being pushed to the sides. A huge crack appeared in the sky. It was actually forcefully split open. Boom. Immediately after, a huge sword shadow with a destructive aura slashed towards Nie Tian in the sky. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and they were shocked to the extreme. It was as if they could already see the scene of Nie Tian being killed by a sword. But in the next moment the strangest thing happened. Hua! The halos around Nie Tian's body suddenly trembled. Then, a ray of light surged out like a layer of ripples, spreading in all directions in the sky. That ripple seemed ordinary, but wherever it passed, space would tremble incessantly. Buzz! Crack, crack, crack! Then, the ripples of light passed through the sword's shadow, and a terrifying force collided with it. A low rumbling sound came from the sky, and then, the gigantic sword's shadow began to crumble. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the gigantic sword's shadow exploded, turning into rays of sword intent in the sky and dissipating. Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them, and they were completely dumbfounded. That seemingly ordinary ripple, how could it contain such a terrifying power? It actually directly shattered the sword's shadow. Lu Mu's eyes darkened as he exclaimed in surprise. Then, he felt that something was wrong. His expression changed, and he retreated in a frenzy. Unfortunately, it was too late. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the ripples of light spread out, and a dull thud could be heard in the sky. Lu Mu's figure was sent flying, drawing a bloody arc in the sky. The ripples of light continued to spread in the sky, and soon dissipated. The crowd's eyes trembled as they glanced at Lu Mu. The latter's body was covered in blood, and his body was swaying. He could not even stand straight. His sword, At that moment, someone realized something and let out a scream. He was so shocked that he was speechless. The crowd was startled, but they quickly reacted. The sword in Lu Mu's hand had shattered. His sword was the Yuan Ling sword. Under the impact of the ripples, not only was Lu Mu's attack destroyed, even the Yuan Ling sword was shattered. With the Yuan Ling destroyed, Lu Mu's martial arts foundation was completely destroyed. At that moment, he was not much stronger than an ordinary person. One could imagine the severity of his injuries. How is this possible? Lu Mu's body trembled, and his eyes stared at Nie Tian in extreme fear. He had spent his entire life to reach the sword tribulation realm. But at that moment, he was a cripple. What kind of power was the heart of the sky? How could it be so terrifying? At that moment, Nie Tian stood in the heart of the sky with a faint smile on his face. In fact, he was very nervous just now and did not know what to do. The strength of the heart of the sky had indeed far exceeded his expectations. The power that it had unleashed was beyond his imagination. The crowd was dumbfounded, and they did not know how to express the shock in their hearts. A sword tribulation realm cultivator was crippled just like that. It was unbelievable. Zhong Mingyu stared at Nie Tian, and his dazed expression slowly relaxed. He could not help but smile. He understood now. Nie Tian was the chosen master of the sky's sky by the heart of the sky. Since he was chosen by the heart of the sky, how could he allow others to hurt Nie Tian? After a long time, the crowd finally calmed down. Their eyes darted between Nie Tian and Lu Mu, not knowing what to say. The scene just now was too terrifying. No one had expected it to happen. Zhong Mingyu wore a dark expression. His cold gaze swept across Lu Mu's figure without saying a word. Following this, he focused his attention on Nie Tian, not knowing what was going to happen next. Since Nie Tian was the chosen master of the sky by the heart of the sky, then Nie Tian would most likely merge with the heart of the sky. The crowd's gazes shifted toward Nie Tian with fiery expressions. Nie Tian was enveloped by layers of light. The strong aura of the sword intent in the surroundings gave him the illusion that his body no longer existed, and that the world was filled with endless sword intent. Bang! 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 At that instant, the glows began to turn violent, emitting ripples that caused the rift to vibrate violently. The crowd could feel the fluctuations of the sword intent in the air, causing their hearts to tremble. Following this, a shocking scene took place. The layers of light began to shrink and converge toward Nietian, trying to enter Nietian's body. Chapter 3385. Little Junior Brother. Little Junior Brother. Zhong Mingyu looked at Nietian. He actually called him Little Junior Brother. Nietian had never had a master before. Why would Zhong Mingyu call him Little Junior Brother? Nietian had indeed met many mentors and friends along the way from the 3,000 lesser worlds, such as Jian Qinqi, Fat Cat, Hua Iru, Ghost Emperor, and others. However, he had never acknowledged anyone as his master. Moreover, he did not know Zhong Mingyu at all. Why would Zhong Mingyu call him Little Junior Brother? But at this moment, Zhong Mingyu was looking at Nietian with a firm gaze. He was very certain that Nietian was his little junior brother. Nietian was the Lord of the Sky chosen by the Heart of the Sky. This made Zhong Mingyu very excited. Next, if there were no accidents, Nietian would merge with the Heart of the Sky and become the Lord of the Sky. Everyone's eyes trembled as they stared unblinkingly at Nietian. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. Rays of light circulated in the sky. The space was filled with a strong aura of sword will. It was incomparably sharp, as if it could tear everything apart. The rays of sword will gathered towards Nietian and merged into his body. Nietian was at the center of the sword will. He could no longer feel his own body. It was as if he had merged with the sword will in the space. He was the sword will itself. Then, under countless gazes, the rays of light surged into Nietian's body and disappeared. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. The crowd did not even have time to accept it. Such a powerful sword will could merge into Nietian's body in such a short time. How was this possible? Everyone was flabbergasted as they stared unblinkingly at Nietian. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. The Heart of the Sky has been merged? Zhong Mingyu was stunned for a long time. He finally reacted and asked in a daze. He had assumed that it would take a long time for Nietian to fuse with the Heart of the Sky. He hadn't expected it to happen in the blink of an eye. At this moment, Nietian, who was high up in the sky, was also shocked. He frowned and was speechless for a long time. He could clearly feel that his martial body was much stronger than before, but his strength and sword Dao realm had not broken through. The Heart of the Sky contained unimaginable power, yet it did not increase his strength at all. How was this possible? However, he could faintly feel that his martial body had undergone some changes, especially his sword intent. His aura had changed, as if the sword intent itself had improved. His sword intent aptitude was definitely one of the best among all sword intent, and the Heart of the Sky actually made his sword intent even more terrifying. The improvement of one's sword intent aptitude was completely different from the improvement of one's sword Dao realm. The improvement of one's sword intent aptitude was a qualitative leap for a swordsman. It would determine the swordsman's future achievements in sword Dao. For example, some swordsmen with low sword intent aptitude would not have high achievements in sword Dao. This was why some swordsmen would encounter bottlenecks in sword Dao and be stuck at a certain realm for a long time without being able to break through. For example, Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren's sword Dao realm had been stuck at the 9th heaven of Saint. They could not break through because their sword intent aptitude was not high enough. Nietian's sword intent aptitude was already very high. Now that he had fused with the Heart of the Sky, it had improved once again. This would determine his future achievements in sword Dao. Nietian, how do you feel? At this moment, Zhong Mingyu's figure moved. He came to Nietian's side and asked nervously. At the same time, he observed his surroundings with a cold glint in his eyes. He was protecting Nietian. The latter had just fused with the Heart of the Sky. Absolute Eagle King and the others obviously knew the value of the Heart of the Sky. Perhaps they would suddenly attack Nye Tian. With a faint smile, Nye Tian nodded and said, "I'm fine, First Guardian." Astonishment filled Zhong Mingyu's face as he examined Nye Tian with his sole awareness. A hint of a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth as he said, "It seems that the vast heaven heart has improved your sword intent aptitude." Yes. Nye Tian nodded. He could not help but glance at Zhong Mingyu. He did not expect the latter's perception to be so strong that he could not even tell that his sword intent aptitude had increased. Zhong Mingyu smiled and glanced at everyone. He said in a loud voice, "Everyone, the heart of the sky has found the master of the sky. Therefore, this year's competition in the sky has come to an end." "It's over?" Everyone's expression changed when they heard Zhong Mingyu's words. They could not help but be stunned. In the past, the competition in the sky not only had the test of the Sky Dome, but also the challenge tournament in the sky. But this time, it had come to an end. This made many people feel a little uncomfortable. But in the past, no one had ever attracted the heart of the sky, and no one had obtained the recognition of the heart of the sky. This time, Nye Tian had attracted the heart of the sky and became the master of the sky. Therefore, it was understandable that the competition in the sky had come to an end. Zhong Mingyu did not care about the others. He directly looked at Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren. The opinions of others were not important. Only these two had the right to speak. Lu Mu was originally the one with the most authority. Unfortunately, he had courted death and insisted on killing Nye Tian. Instead, his Yuan spirit sword was destroyed and he was no different from a cripple. "Zhong Mingyu, what do you mean by that?" Absolute Eagle King looked at Zhong Mingyu and asked with a cold smile. "The competition in the sky was originally to find a swordsman qualified to become the master of the sky. Now that Nye Tian has become the master of the sky, the competition has lost its meaning. There is no need to continue." Zhong Mingyu smiled faintly and said in a loud voice, "The so-called competition in the sky was to find the master of the sky. Now that the master of the sky has been confirmed, there was naturally no need to continue." "Humph!" Absolute Eagle King sneered and looked at Nye Tian with a strange gaze. He said with disdain, "Zhong Mingyu, are you saying that this brat is the master of the sky? Is there a problem?" Zhong Mingyu frowned and said, "Just now, the voice that came from the Sky Dome, I think everyone here heard it. Nye Tian has obtained the recognition of the heart of the sky and has fused with the heart of the sky. He is the master of the sky." "Bullshit." Just as Zhong Mingyu finished speaking, Gui Tongren roared and pointed at Nye Tian and said, "A brat who has just reached the transcendent profound realm is also worthy of being the master of the sky. What are you trying to say?" Zhong Mingyu frowned. His eyes flashed with a cold light as he stared at Gui Tongren. "Zhong Mingyu, you said that this brat has fused with the heart of the sky. How can you prove it?" Gui Tongren smiled coldly and said, "The heart of the sky is a sacred item of the heavens and earth. This brat has fused with the heart of the sky. Has his strength increased? If I'm not wrong, he is still an ant with the strength of an 8th step false sage. Just an ant like him. You say that he is the master of the sky. Who would believe it?" Zhong Mingyu frowned. His face was gloomy and he did not say anything. How could he not hear that the Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren were being unreasonable? Everyone had heard and seen what had just happened. Even Lu Mu had been crippled by the backlash from the vast heaven's heart. Is this not enough to prove that Nye Tian is the master of the sky? What do you want? At this time, a calm voice rang out. A silver-haired figure took a step forward and looked cold at Gui Tongren. Chapter 3386. Too troublesome. Hearing Nye Tian's voice, everyone turned to look at him, their eyes filled with curiosity and doubt. They were curious as to why Nye Tian was chosen by the heart of the sky and became the lord of the sky. They were curious as to why Nye Tian's strength did not increase at all after fusing with the heart of the sky. At this moment, They were looking forward to what Nye Tian would say in the face of doubt. Humph. Gui Tong Ren's cold eyes stared at Nye Tian and sneered. Brat, if you want us to recognize your identity, it's very simple. You just need to prove your strength. How do I prove it? Nye Tian's lips twitched as he sneered and asked. The Sky Tournament will continue. Let us see what kind of ability you, the Lord of the Sky, have. Gui Tong Ren's eyes were filled with murderous intent as he said in a cold tone. So you guys want to let the Sky Tournament continue? Nye Tian laughed. His eyes flickered as he said, You guys don't want to see my strength, but I want to kill me, right? Gui Tong Ren frowned. He didn't expect Nye Tian to be so smart and say it so bluntly. Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tong Ren indeed wanted to kill Nye Tian. Although they said that they didn't believe that Nye Tian was the Lord of the Sky, they were very clear in their hearts that Nye Tian was the Lord of the Sky. The heart of the sky had already been fused with Nye Tian. They couldn't snatch it away, so they could only kill Nye Tian. In the sky, they had already seen how terrifying Nye Tian's talent was. Now that Nye Tian had fused with the heart of the sky, his talent in Sword Dao had undoubtedly improved. Once Nye Tian matured in the future, it was simply unimaginable how terrifying he would be. Therefore, they had to kill Nye Tian before Nye Tian grew up. But with Zhong Mingyu here, if Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tong Ren directly tried to kill him, it would undoubtedly be a complete fallout. Zhong Mingyu himself wasn't scary, but the person behind him was. Even the Seven Despair Devil Palace and the Ghost Jail sect were afraid of that person. It was not worth it to offend a true powerhouse just to kill Nye Tian. So Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tong Ren wanted to kill Nye Tian on the stage in the sky. Zhong Mingyu suggested that the sky martial competition should end here. Of course, they did not agree. Kid, it doesn't matter if you've gained the approval of the heart of the sky. If you can't gain the approval of everyone here, you can't be the master of the sky. At this time, the Absolute Eagle King smiled cold and said, If you want to be the Lord of the Sky, then prove yourself in the sky arena. Prove myself. Nye Tian looked at the Absolute Eagle King, the corner of his mouth pulled up into a smile and said, You want to kill me, yet you say it in such a dignified manner. How shameless. Kid, you don't even dare to fight in the sky arena. What makes you the master of the sky? The Absolute Eagle King's face darkened and he roared. In I's opinion, the master of the sky is no different from trash. The eyes of the crowd trembled. The way they looked at Nye Tian couldn't help but change. There was some disdain and even disdain. Although Nye Tian had become the master of the sky, his current performance made them look down on him. If he didn't dare to fight in the arena, then he shouldn't have stood up. If he stood up now and didn't dare to accept the challenge, he would only be ridiculed. Nye Tian. At this time, a low voice sounded. The crowd looked in the direction of the voice. It turned out to be Jun Zueji. The latter's eyes were cold. He stared coldly at Nye Tian and said word by word, You really are trash. When the crowd heard this, their eyes trembled violently and their faces were filled with shock. Jun Zueji had already betrayed the sword martialist of the sky and became a member of the Yu King sword sect. But now that Lu Mu of the Yu King sword sect was a cripple, how could he still be so arrogant? Zhong Mingyu suddenly turned around, killing intent surging in his eyes. It was obvious that he wanted to kill Jun Zueji. Jun Zueji's betrayal of the sword martialist of the sky made him very angry. If it weren't for Lu Mu, he would have already attacked. At this moment, Lu Mu was already a cripple. Zhong Mingyu could kill Jun Zueji with one hand. Jun Zueji standing up to speak now was simply asking for death. First Protector, let me handle this. However, at this moment, Nye Tian laughed and extended his hand to stop Zhong Mingyu. Then, he looked at Jun Zueji with a dark gaze and said with a faint smile, Jun Zueji, if you say I'm trash, then what are you? Trash and traitor? I, this trash, was able to set foot on the 10th heaven of the sky. But you, a traitor, are not even qualified to set foot on the 10th heaven. So, you are a traitor who is even worse than trash. Nietian, you. Jun Zueji's eyes narrowed. His eyes shone with a cold light, as if he wanted to eat someone alive. He was someone who fought for first place in everything. But now Nietian called him a traitor and trash. How could he accept this? He hated Nietian to the bone. At this moment, he wanted nothing more than to skin Nietian alive. Kid, why are you talking so much nonsense? Do you dare to stand on the clear sky arena or not? Absolute Eagle King laughed coldly and shouted arrogantly at that moment. From his point of view, Nietian was afraid and was wasting time with him. Nietian. Zhong Mingyu looked at Nietian with a dark gaze and shook his head. He was worried that Nietian would be provoked by Absolute Eagle King and agree to the latter's request. First Protector, I know what I'm doing. Nietian smiled and sent a message to Zhong Mingyu. Then, he looked at Absolute Eagle King and said with a smirk, I have already obtained the approval of the Heart of the Sky. So, whether you guys approve or not is meaningless to me. So, there is no need for the arena in the sky. Absolute Eagle King frowned and sneered. So, the so-called Master of the Sky is a coward who doesn't even dare to step on the arena. A mere transcendent ultimacy trash. Even if you lend him 100 guts, he wouldn't dare to step on the arena. Gui Tongren sneered as well, his eyes filled with disdain and malice. The swordsman of the Clear Sky Sword Martial Sect, on the other hand, looked dejected. Obviously, they were very disappointed with Nietian's response. Zhong Mingyu, on the other hand, let out a long breath of turbid air. The stone hanging in his heart was finally lifted. He was really afraid that Nietian would agree to Absolute Eagle King's request and step on the arena in the sky. Although Nietian had fused with the Heart of the Sky, his strength had not increased. It was almost impossible for him to fight against Jun Zueji and the others. Nietian's current actions might seem a little weak, but it was the best way for him to save his life. With Nietian's talent, it was only a matter of time before he matured. So, there was no need to risk his life. Humph. But at this time, Nietian suddenly sneered and stared at Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren with disdain. Kid, what are you laughing at? Absolute Eagle King and Gui Tongren's faces sank, killing intent surging in their eyes. At this moment, they wanted to directly attack. You too, I don't want to step on the arena in the sky because I think it's too troublesome. Nietian faintly smiled, his face calm. His gaze swept across the crowd and he said in a loud voice, I know you are all wondering why the Heart of the Sky chose me. In order to solve your doubts, I am prepared to accept your challenge. Chapter 3387. Come and accept your death. The calm voice was like a clap of thunder that stunned everyone present. Their expressions froze and they couldn't believe their ears. Nietian was challenging everyone. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Nietian, as if they were looking at a madman. Challenging all the swordsmen participating in the sky competition by himself. If Nietian wasn't crazy, then what was? However, at this moment, Nietian was incomparably calm. His face was indifferent, and there wasn't the slightest ripple in his eyes. He was so calm that people's hair stood on end. Nietian, you. Zhong Mingyu, who was standing beside Nietian, was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted. He stared at Nietian in shock, speechless. He didn't want Nietian to continue participating in the challenge tournament in the sky competition, but the latter had come up with something even worse. He was standing there and accepting everyone's challenge. He couldn't help but suspect that the Master of the Sky competition before him wasn't mentally sound. If this was the challenge tournament, Nietian would have participated as a normal person and wouldn't have been able to meet all the strong opponents. But now, he was challenging everyone. This meant that he was destined to meet all the strong opponents. Zhong Mingyu couldn't understand where Nietian got his confidence from. Nie Tian had just told him that he knew what he was doing. At this moment, he wanted to yell at Nie Tian, "Is this what you think you're doing?" But at this moment, Nie Tian had already said it. There was no going back. "Kid, what did you just say?" At this moment, the absolute Eagle King finally reacted. His eyes shone with a fiery light as he asked in surprise, "Didn't you hear what I said?" Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, I, Nie Tian, will stand here and accept anyone's challenge. If anyone isn't convinced, they can come up and fight me." The calm voice was sonorous and powerful, causing the crowd to be startled. In fact, Nie Tian naturally had his own reasons for challenging everyone by himself. He wanted to see just how powerful these swordsmen from the Saints' world were. On the other hand, he did this to protect the swordsmen of the Sky Blade Master. With Jun Zueji, Heartless, Gui Jiaozi, and the others' savagery, once the tournament in the sky begins, they will definitely not show mercy to the swordsmen of the Sky Sword Martial School. At that time, it was unknown how many people would die. Therefore, Nie Tian was determined to challenge all of them single-handedly. "Alright. Very good." The absolute Eagle King's eyes trembled and his expression became fanatical. He said, "Kid, it seems that I underestimated you. You have more guts than I expected." Cut the crap." Nie Tianling sneered and said, "I said I would accept everyone's challenge, not including you old monsters. What are you so excited about? Why would someone of I's status fight a junior like you?" The absolute Eagle King sneered and glanced at the people behind him. He said coldly, "Who is willing to kill this kid?" He couldn't wait any longer, so he asked the people from the 7 Despair Demon Palace to do it. The others were stunned. They didn't expect the absolute Eagle King to be so impatient. Many people hadn't reacted yet. "Let me do it! Let me do it! Let me do it!" The people from the 7 Despair Demon Palace went crazy as soon as they heard the absolute Eagle King's word. One by one, they stepped forward and stared at Nie Tian with vicious eyes. The weakest swordsman among them was at the 3rd layer Sword Rhyme realm. They didn't take Nie Tian seriously at all. Previously, Nie Tian had indeed exchanged a few blows with Jun Zueji in the Sky Dome, but that was under the effect of the restriction. Now, everyone's strength was only suppressed to the peak of the 9th level pseudosage, but their Yuan meridians and bloodline power were not suppressed. Many people thought that they could easily kill Nie Tian. Heartless, Gui Jiaozi, and the rest were naturally not in a hurry. They were all smart people. It was better to let these weaklings test Nie Tian's strength first. If Nie Tian couldn't even beat these people, there was no need for them to make a move. "It's you." The absolute Eagle King smiled cold and glanced at the people behind him. He pointed at a swordsman at the 5th layer Sword Rhyme realm. "My lord, I won't let you down. I will definitely kill that kid." The man's eyes lit up and he bowed. "Go." The absolute Eagle King smiled faintly and waved his hand. "Yes." The man replied. His figure moved like a sword ray and shot up into the sky. He stood in the void with a pair of poisonous eyes. He stared at Nie Tian cold and shouted, "Brat, come up and accept your death." The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He didn't say anything else and directly stepped up into the sky. In the sky, 2 figures were like 2 sharp swords. Their sword intent soared into the sky, causing the surrounding space to tremble slightly. "Brat, I want to see how a trash like you, with your transcendent god's profound meaning, can obtain the approval of the clear heaven's heart." The swordsman's face was gloomy and his eyes were full of killing intent. He shouted cold and his sword intent burst out like a raging wave, causing the void to tremble. "Make your move." Nie Tian's face was calm. The corner of his mouth twitched as he said cold. He didn't want to waste time talking to such an idiot. "You're courting death." The swordsman felt Nie Tian's disdain and became furious. He roared and moved in an instant. Sword intent surged out of his body. The power that erupted in an instant was as terrifying as an avalanche, causing the void to rumble. Although this swordsman was arrogant, he was also at the fifth sky of swordsmanship. His sword intent was sharp and murderous. So strong. The crowd trembled slightly. Someone shouted in shock. However, the majority of the people were very calm. They had already seen how Nie Tian killed Yang Bingxian. That was truly terrifying. Although this swordsman was strong, compared to Yang Bingxian, he was still much weaker. If Nie Tian could kill Yang Bingxian, he could also kill this swordsman. Die! Nie Tian felt the fluctuation of sword intent in the air. The corner of his mouth twitched. Then, he directly stabbed out with his starlight heaven slash. The sword's shadows whistled through the sky and the terrifying chi shook the earth. Rumble! In the next moment, the two sword shadows collided. The void trembled and then one of the sword shadows shattered, turning into a wave of sword intent. Boom! Then, the other sword shadow soared into the sky like a dragon, exploding with terrifying power. The swordsman's eyes trembled. He didn't even have time to scream before he was engulfed by the sword shadows. Not even his bones were left. Nie Tian's figure stood in the void, unmoving like a mountain. One sword. Just one sword and he killed the swordsman. A swordsman at the fifth sky of swordsmanship died tragically. Hiss! The crowd was shocked by the scene in front of them. After taking a deep breath, their expressions froze. Chapter 3388. Just me. The scene was dead silent as Nie Tian's sword fell. It took a long time for the crowd to react. How is this possible? Nie Tian is too scary. That person was a swordsman at the fifth level of sword aura. How could he be killed so easily? Their voices echoed one after another, showing how shocked they were. The power of Nie Tian's sword strike was beyond everyone's expectations. A swordsman at the fifth level of sword aura was killed by a swordsman with a transcendent esoteric swordsman. This scene was too shocking. The swordsmen in the sky knew that Nie Tian was strong, but they didn't expect Nie Tian to be this strong. Even Zhong Mingyu was stunned and couldn't react for a long time. He could clearly feel that Nie Tian's battle prowess was several times stronger than before. At this moment, the person with the worst expression was the absolute Eagle King. His old face was tense and his eyes were trembling. It was obvious that he was suppressing his terrifying anger. Old man, do you know why the heart of the sky chose me now? Nie Tian raised an eyebrow and looked at the absolute Eagle King provocatively. The absolute Eagle King's face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. He gritted his teeth and said, "Kid, your strength has indeed exceeded I's expectations. But don't get cocky too early. The truly strong opponent is still behind." With that, he turned around and locked his gaze on Heartless. It was obvious that he wanted Heartless to make a move. A casual strike from Nie Tian could kill a swordsman at the fifth level of sword aura. Among the swordsmen in the 7 Ultimate Demon Palace, besides Heartless, who was at the 9th level of sword aura, no one was a match for Nie Tian. Heartless frowned slightly and nodded heavily. He took a step forward and leaped into the sky. His face was gloomy, and his entire body was filled with killing intent. This opponent is not bad. Nie Tian smiled faintly. His face was full of disdain. In fact, the power of the sword just now was something that even he did not expect. He did not use the Celestial Evolution Saint Soul, nor did he use any powerful sword technique. He had actually killed that person directly, which was beyond his expectations. It seemed that the heart of the sky had elevated his sword intent aptitude to a terrifying level. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to casually kill a swordsman at the 5th level of the sword rhythm with his transcendent, profound meaning realm. Nie Tian, you've only killed an ant. Do you think you're invincible under the heavens? Heartless laughed coldly as his eyes, which were hidden under his eye mask, trembled in a strange manner. Other pupils? Nie Tian frowned and his expression changed slightly. In that instant, he felt a ripple of eye powers. Although it was very weak and fleeting, he was very sure that it was a ripple of eye powers. Could it be that under the heartless eye mask was a pair of other pupils? Nye Tian narrowed his eyes and became much more cautious. Brother Nye, let me take on this person. At that moment, a voice suddenly rang out. Then, a figure stepped into the air and leaped into the sky. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at that person. He could not help but frown. This swordsman looked very young. He had a head of red hair that was like fire, sword-like eyebrows, and sharp eyes. However, he was at the 8th level of the sword rhythm realm, and his body was burning so fiercely that the air around him seemed to be in a dense state. Nye Tian could not help but feel puzzled as he did not know this person. I am Li Jin. Li Jin smiled faintly, cupped his hands, and said his name. He is Li Jin. As soon as he said this, the surrounding crowd could not help but exclaim. Li Jin was a name that was not unfamiliar to the swordsmen of the Sky Sword Martial School. This was because this person was ranked second on the Sky Sword leaderboard, second only to Jun Zueji. So he is Li Jin. No wonder he is ranked second on the Sky Sword leaderboard. He is already at the 8th level of the Sword Realm. The crowd's eyes trembled as they looked at Li Jin with admiration. So Brother Li is ranked second on the Sky Sword leaderboard. I have been rude. Nye Tian heard the crowd's words and his lips twitched. He smiled faintly and said politely, Brother Nye, you are being too polite. Li Jin smiled as well. He then looked at Zhu Qing and said coldly, You look down on the Sky Sword Martial School. I, Li Jin, as a member of the Sky Sword Martial School, represent the Sky Sword Martial School to challenge you. You? Zhu Qing snickered coldly. It was obvious that he did not think highly of Li Jin. Me. Li Jin smiled coldly and took a step forward. Sword intent gushed out from his entire body. Waves of frightening sword intent turned into crimson flames in the air and burned in the void. It made him look like a giant flaming sword. It was extremely frightening. Everyone was shocked by Li Jin's shocking strength. In the Sky Sword Martial School, Li Jin and Yang Bingxian were equally famous. One's sword energy was fire while the other's sword energy was ice. They were known as the Ice and Fire Twin Stars. However, Yang Bingxian had already died in the hands of Nye Tian. Everyone could feel that Li Jin's strength was obviously stronger than Yang Bingxuan's. He was strong enough to challenge Zhu Qing. Fire attribute sword energy. Interesting. At this moment Zhu Qing's lips twitched. He seemed to be interested. Heartless, do you dare to accept my challenge? Li Jin roared in a low voice, his voice fierce. Before the competition in the Sky Sword Martial School started, he originally saw Nye Tian as his opponent. However, the development of the situation was beyond his expectations. Nye Tian challenged everyone on his own. As a member of the Sky Sword Martial School, of course, he would not challenge Nye Tian. However, he was not willing to let Nye Tian shine alone. Therefore, he stood out and wanted to take on a tough battle for Nye Tian. Humph. Zhu Qing sneered. His killing intent was cold as he said, Since you are seeking death, I will fulfill your wish. I will kill you first, then kill Nye Tian. I'm afraid you don't have the ability. Li Jin growled. The sword energy around his body became even more terrifying. A sea of flames appeared behind him. Nye Tian frowned. He thought for a moment and cupped his hands at Li Jin. Brother Li, be careful. Since Li Jin had taken the initiative to come out, Nye Tian could not stop him. He felt that Li Jin was a smart person. Since he dared to stand out, he must have something to rely on. He might not be able to defeat Zhu Qing, but he should at least have the ability to protect himself. Li Jin smiled faintly. He looked confident. Brother Li, be careful of this person's eyes. Nye Tian turned around and transmitted his voice to Li Jin. Then, he retreated. Li Jin frowned. He looked at Zhu Qing's eye mask and became more cautious. You are Li Jin, right? At this moment, Zhu Qing smiled coldly and said, I will let you see what a real fire attribute sword energy is. Boom. As the sound of his voice faded, sword will gushed out from his body in a frenzy. Waves of terrifying dark aura were released, rushing into the air and transforming into boundless black flames that burned in the air. He was like a berserk beast, incomparably violent. Chapter 3389. Chapter 3384. Demonic Sword, Boom. High up in the sky, Merciless held a black longsword in his hand. It had a strange shape and was emitting a terrifying demonic aura. The pressure caused the void to tremble. At this moment, everyone felt an intense pressure. Their expressions changed as their eyes locked onto the black sword in Merciless' hand. That sword is so terrifying. How can it release such a powerful demonic aura? That sword is too strange. It's as if there's an endless amount of demonic aura sealed within it. Merciless can actually control such a terrifying demonic sword. He's too powerful. The crowd discussed among themselves as they looked at Merciless with unconcealable fear. The black longsword in Merciless' hand gave off an intense pressure that made people shudder. Humph! Absolute Eagle King looked at Li Jin from afar and sneered, a little ant actually dares to challenge Merciless. He's really courting death. Brother Absolute, could that sword be? At the side, Gui Tongren looked at Absolute Eagle King and seemed to realize something terrifying. His eyes suddenly trembled and he was so scared that he couldn't finish his sentence. That's right. Absolute Eagle King's gaze swept across Gui Tongren, his face cold as he nodded. It's really. Gui Tongren's eyes narrowed again. His expression stiffened and he couldn't say a word. He was a swordsman at the 9th heaven of Saint. What exactly was that demonic sword to make him so afraid? First Guardian, could that black sword be? On the other side, eternally Merciless stood beside Zhong Mingyu. His eyes trembled as he looked at Zhong Mingyu in horror. Even his voice was trembling. Yes. Zhong Mingyu was also shocked, but he still maintained his composure. He nodded and said, Demonic Sword of Seven Despair. It's really the demonic sword of Seven Despair. Eternally Merciless' expression darkened. He had already expected it when he felt the powerful demonic aura within the demonic sword. But when he confirmed it from Zhong Mingyu, he was still shocked. The Seven Extinction Devil Sword, the palace-shaking sword of the Seven Extinction Devil Palace. It was rumored that the first master of the Seven Extinction Devil Palace, the Seven Extinction Devil Ancestor, had sealed the vengeful souls of billions of living beings into a piece of the Devil Dragon Valiant Bone, finally forging a peerless devil weapon, the Seven Extinction Devil Sword. Ancestor Chijua had once wielded the Seven Extinction Demon Sword and defeated countless powerful enemies. However, after the fall of the Seven Absolute Devil Ancestor, no one in the Seven Absolute Devil Palace was able to control the Seven Absolute Devil Sword. This was because the vengeful spirit energy and demonic dragon energy in the sword were too strong for ordinary people to control. It was exactly because of this that the status of the Demon Palace of Seven Despair fell again and again. In the end, it was reduced to a medium-sized organization in the All-Heaven Saints world. Who would have thought that after the fall of the Chijua ancestor, another person who could control the Chijua demonic sword would appear? At this moment, Heartless held the Seven Despair demon sword in his hand. It was as if a demon had descended. Demonic chi surged all over his body. His entire person was like an abyss of demonic chi that could devour everything. Eternally Merciless was stunned for a few seconds. His eyes trembled as he asked nervously, First Guardian, do you think Li Jin can withstand a blow from the Seven Despair demon sword? Zhong Mingyu frowned and said solemnly, I hope he can survive after one blow from the sword. His words were very clear. Li Jin could only withstand one blow from the Seven Despair demon sword at most. After one blow, Li Jin would be very lucky to survive. Eternally merciless eyes trembled, and he did not speak any more. The aura of that sword is too terrifying. Nie Tian looked at Heartless from afar. He frowned and was secretly worried. He had never seen a sword that could release such terrifying demonic chi energy. Your sword. At the same time, high up in the sky, Lai Jin looked at the 7 Despair Demon sword in Heartless' hands. His eyes trembled and his expression was very ugly. He was tens of thousands of meters away from Heartless, but he could feel waves of terrifying demonic chi rushing towards him. It made him feel like he was suffocating. He did not dare to imagine how Heartless could withstand the pressure of the 7 Despair Demon sword's demonic chi. Are you afraid? Heartless smiled coldly. The corner of his mouth was cold. The murderous aura around his body rumbled continuously. His entire person was very violent. Lai Jin frowned and calmed down a little. He was indeed afraid. However, once the words left his mouth, there was no way for him to retreat. He could only fight. Make your move. Lai Jin roared. Sword will gushed out of his body. Waves of fiery sword will rolled in the air. The scorching aura rushed into the void as if it wanted to burn the heaven and earth. Die. Zhu Qing sneered coldly, after which, his silhouette flickered, causing the entire space to tremble. On top of the 7 Extinction Demon sword, a boundless black demonic flame was emitted. A terrifying demonic chi filled the entire space. Boom! In the next moment, a terrifying demonic flame sword shadow appeared. Like a violent demonic dragon, it bared its fangs and brandished its claws. Covered the sky and covered the earth. It was so oppressive that the demonic flame made a loud noise as if it wanted to burn everything. In the blink of an eye, the entire heaven and earth turned into a sea of flames. The scorching aura caused the entire heaven and earth to burn. Lai Jin frowned. He directly ignited his chi and forcefully slashed out with his sword. A fiery sword shadow howled. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, the 2 demonic flames collided. The heaven and earth shook. Tongues of flames rushed out like wild beasts, as if they wanted to devour the entire heaven and earth. Boom, boom, boom. The crimson-red flames and the black demonic flame clashed and swallowed each other, turning the entire heaven and earth into a boundless purgatory. Everyone felt the impact of the flames and they all retreated. Especially the black demonic flame released by Heartless. It contained a terrifyingly strong chi that suffocated everyone. The eyes of the crowd trembled. They didn't think that Lai Jin would be so strong that he could fight against Heartless head-on. Bang! However, at that moment, in the space that was filled with flames, a muffled sound rang out. Then, a silhouette was flung out, leaving a trail of blood in the air. Lai Jin. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He clearly saw that the bloody silhouette was Lai Jin. After all, Lai Jin was no match for Heartless. Lai Jin was a swordsman of the fire attribute. However, his sword will was obviously not as strong as Heartless and was countered by his opponent. In addition, Heartless had the demonic sword of sevens, which made it even harder for him to fight back. However, Lai Jin's silhouette stabilized in the air. His eyes trembled and his breathing was a little unstable. Phew! Zhong Mingyu and the rest looked at Lai Jin from afar and let out a long sigh. At least Lai Jin's life was saved. Humph humph. At that moment, Heartless' silhouette stepped out of the flames. He sneered and said, "You little ant, you are quite capable. You actually survived under my demonic sword of sevens." "I admit defeat." Lai Jin frowned and said unwillingly. He originally thought that even if he couldn't defeat Heartless, he could at least fight with him. He didn't expect that he couldn't even block one move from Heartless. "Brother Lai." At that moment, Nie Tian came to Lai Jin's side and faintly smiled. He channeled the power of the vein of the earth into the latter to help him stabilize his breathing. "Brother Nie, I'm sorry to disappoint you." Lai Jin's expression turned slightly better. He looked at Nie Tian and said with a bitter smile. Chapter 3390. Battle of the Two Dragons. After Nie Tian finished speaking, he took a step forward. His aura surged out crazily, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Nie Tian, he's going to make a move. Everyone's eyes trembled, and their expressions became heated as they waited for the moment when Nie Tian would make a move. Nie Tian had killed Yang Bingxian before, and now that he had merged with the Heart of the Sky, his strength had increased a lot. He should be able to fight against Heartless. If he couldn't even beat Heartless, how could he talk about the upcoming battle between Gui Jiaozi and Jun Zuiji? Zhong Mingyu looked at Nie Tian, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He suddenly became nervous. He didn't know how strong Nie Tian was right now, and he didn't expect Nie Tian to defeat Heartless and the others. He only hoped that Nie Tian could survive. If Nie Tian's life was threatened, he would definitely make a move. Nie Tian, it's your turn. Heartless smiled coldly, and the demonic flames on his body became even more violent. It was as if 10,000 demons were dancing wildly, and the impact caused the void to rumble endlessly. Come. Nie Tian smiled faintly as his eyes darkened slightly. A terrifying sword aura surged out from his body and actually caused the space around him to sink. Immediately, the rolling devilish flames around him began to disperse. Very good! Heartless shouted, and the 7 extinction demonic swords slashed through the void. A terrifying demonic chi was released, and the demonic flames in the air became even more violent, as if they wanted to burn everything. Brother Ju, do you think this brat called Nie Tian can block the 7 extinction demonic sword? In the distant void, Gui Tongren's eyes turned, and a playful expression appeared on his face. He suddenly looked at Jueying King and asked, "Humph." Jueying King sneered and said, "The 7 extinction demonic sword was forged by the founding ancestor of the 7 extinction demonic palace. Besides the founding ancestor, Heartless is the only one who can control it. Although that kid called Nie Tian is very strange, I am sure that under the 7 extinction demonic sword, he won't last more than 3 moves. 3 moves? Gui Tong's eyes slightly narrowed. He let out a strange laugh and no longer spoke. He was an astute person. Although Extreme Eagle King spoke resolutely, he could hear a trace of worry. If Jueying King had enough confidence in Heartless and the 7 extinction demonic sword, why would he say 3 moves? It seemed like the Extreme Eagle King was already afraid of Nie Tian. Gui Jiaozi and Jun Zuiji were watching from afar like tigers eyeing their prey. To be honest, they didn't want Nie Tian to be defeated or killed by Heartless. If that happened, they wouldn't have a chance to make a move. To them, the best outcome would be for Nie Tian and Heartless to fight until both sides were heavily injured. Then, Nie Tian would continue to accept their challenges. However, they felt that Nie Tian shouldn't be a match for Heartless. Gui Jiaozi knew that Heartless' strength lay not only in his 7 extinction demonic sword, but also in his eyes. Whether or not Nie Tian could block the 7 extinction demonic sword was unknown, not to mention those eyes. At this time, the eyes of the crowd were trembling and their expressions were not very good. Clearly, they were worried for Nie Tian. Even though Nie Tian was strong, the opponent he was facing was even stronger. 7 extinction demonic dragon kill. At this time, Heartless roared and his figure instantly moved. The 7 extinction demonic sword wildly slashed out. A resplendent sword light appeared and cut through the sky, leaving a trail of flames in the air. Roar! In the next moment, endless sword intent and demonic flames condensed together. A huge demonic flame dragon appeared and roared in the air. The dragon's roar shook the heavens and the earth. It carried a terrifying destructive power and crazily pressed towards Nie Tian. How terrifying! This scene made the eyes of the crowd tremble, and they directly cried out in alarm. At this moment, the power that Heartless displayed was even more terrifying than the sword that defeated Li Jin. Obviously, he didn't treat Li Jin as a real opponent. At this moment, facing Nie Tian, he revealed his true strength. Boom! The demonic dragon's power shook the heavens and the earth, oppressing the void. Demonic flames appeared in the void, turning the heavens and the earth into a sea of flames, wanting to burn Nie Tian to death directly. Nie Tianling stood in the void and slightly frowned. On the surface, Heartless looked arrogant, but in reality, he was very careful. He didn't underestimate Nie Tian at all. His first move was such a terrifying sword move. Boom! In the next moment, Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed. His body shook and a violent dragon aura surged out of his body. In the sea of dragon aura behind him, a huge red dragon appeared. Its huge body rolled out and suddenly, a terrifying dragon aura rushed out, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Dragon aura! The eyes of the crowd trembled as they felt the violent dragon aura rushing towards them. They immediately cried out in alarm. No one would have thought that Nie Tian's body actually contained such a huge amount of dragon aura. Nie Tian wanted to use the power of the supreme dragon bloodline to resist the 7 extinction demonic sword. Roar dash! Roar dash! In the void, the 2 dragons roared. The surrounding space trembled crazily as if the heavens and the earth were about to collapse. Nie Tian's supreme dragon bloodline released the most terrifying dragon aura, and Heartless 7 extinction demonic sword was forged from the bones of the demonic dragon. It also contained the terrifying demonic dragon aura. Under the influence of the 2 dragon auras, the space became very fragile. The crowd frantically retreated once again as they looked at the scene in the void with a horrified expression. Boom! At this moment, the Crimson Dragon and the Blazing Demon Dragon collided with each other, and an explosive sound rang out. Immediately, a terrifying dragon chi was released, and the destructive power caused the space within tens of thousands of meters to collapse with a loud bang. Boom, 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 crack, 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 in the void, terrifying rumbles and the sound of space collapsing resounded. Waves of violent energy clashed together, forming a terrifying strangling power that seemed to want to destroy everything. The void was chaotic, as if it was the end of the world. Nie Tian and Heartless figures were completely engulfed by the sea of light. King Jueying, Zhong Mingyu, and the rest of the experts were shocked. Their eyes trembled. It was hard to imagine that the battle scene in front of them was created by 2 young martial artists. After a long time, the violent energy in the void gradually dissipated. 2 figures appeared in the sky above the crowd. Nie Tianling stood in the void. His eyes were as calm as water, but they were sharp. As for Heartless, his face was gloomy and there was a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth. In the battle between the 2 dragons, Heartless had actually lost. Under that level of impact, Nie Tian's strength did not gain any advantage. However, his martial physique had become his greatest advantage. Although Heartless' realm was stronger than Nie Tian's, his martial physique was weaker than Nie Tian's. Nie Tian could withstand the same attack, but Heartless might not be able to. Everyone saw Nie Tian and Heartless figures clearly. Their eyes trembled violently and they were momentarily speechless. No one would have thought that after a fight, the one who was injured was actually Heartless. How is this possible? King Jueying's eyes suddenly trembled as he cried out in alarm. His entire body was stunned, and his face was as ugly as it could be. The scene in front of him was something he had never expected. Gui Tongren's mouth twitched as he had a gloating expression. Of course, he did not wish for Nie Tian to die at Heartless' hands. That way there would be no chance for Gui Jiaozi to perform. Nie Tian. However, at this moment, Heartless suddenly took a step forward. He raised his arm and placed it on top of the eye mask. Nie Tian frowned and his heart could not help but sink. Chapter 3391. The Demon Dragon's Eye. You're finally going to use your other eye, Nie Tian said as he looked cold at Heartless. He had already realized that Heartless' eyes were extraordinary, so the scene before him did not surprise him too much. Nie Tian, your strength has exceeded my expectations. But that doesn't matter. It won't change the result, Heartless said coldly, enunciating each word with a murderous intent. He slowly took off his eye patch, revealing a pair of eyes as dark as the night. Boom! At that moment the void suddenly exploded. Everyone seemed to see a pair of huge, evil eyes appear behind Heartless. It flashed for a moment and disappeared. It was extremely strange. Nie Tian frowned and his expression changed. He could feel that Heartless' eyes contained a terrifying dragon chi. The dragon chi was even stronger and more terrifying than the chi of the demon dragon on the 7 Despair demon sword. How could this be? Nie Tian was shocked and very confused. He had clearly sensed the aura of the eye power in Heartless' eyes, but now, his eyes were releasing such a terrifying dragon chi. Nie Tian, this guy's eyes are not other eyes. At that moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice suddenly sounding very surprised. If it's not other eyes, then what is it? Nie Tian frowned, his face full of shock. It's the demon dragon's eye. The Ghost Emperor paused for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "The demon dragon's eye?" Nie Tian was stunned, and his expression became even more confused. Could it be that Heartless' eyes were not the eyes of a human, but the eyes of a dragon? It is the demon dragon's eye. The Ghost Emperor nodded and said, "His eyes are not his original eyes. They should be the demon dragon's eye that was transplanted when he was young. It really is a dragon's eye." Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and his heart was extremely shocked. He had never thought that Heartless' eyes would be the demon dragon's eye. Nie Tian, the demonic dragon, is a powerhouse of the Sage Realm Dragon Clan. The Heartless demonic dragon's eyes should have come from the primordial demonic dragon king. The Ghost Emperor's face sank. "I don't know what kind of power those eyes contain. You must be careful." Nie Tian nodded. He couldn't help but feel a little nervous. This kid actually fused with the eye of the demon dragon. In the distance, Gui Tongren looked at Merciless and exclaimed in shock. After a long time, he finally understood and said with a trembling voice, "No wonder he can control the 7 extinction evil swords, it was because of the demonic dragon eye." "Brother Gui, are you surprised to see the demonic dragon's eye?" Absolute Eagle King sneered. He glanced at Gui Tongren and said coldly, "Heartless, open the demon dragon eye. I want to see how long this Nye brat can last." The eye of the demon dragon, this was Heartless' greatest trump card. It was precisely because of the existence of the demonic dragon eye that Heartless was able to withstand the demonic chi pressure of the 7 demise demonic sword. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to control the 7 extinction evil swords. "Oh no!" Zhong Mingyu's eyes trembled and he cried out in his heart. His face was filled with unconcealable nervousness. He never thought that Heartless would have the eye of the demon dragon. Nie Tian could defeat Heartless with the 7 extinction evil swords, but it was absolutely impossible for him to defeat Heartless with the eye of the demon dragon. "Nie Tian, this is the first time I used the eye of the demon dragon. I didn't expect it to be used on a swordsman whose strength is far inferior to mine." High up in the sky, Heartless' voice sounded. "You should feel extremely honored to die with the eye of the demon dragon." When Heartless was young, in order to fuse with the eye of the demon dragon, he personally gouged out his own eyes. After experiencing unimaginable pain, he finally succeeded in making the eye of the demon dragon his own eyes. Usually, he always wore an eye mask to protect the eye of the demon dragon. He had experienced countless life and death battles, but he had never used the eye of the demon dragon. He didn't expect that the first time he used the eye of the demon dragon would be on a swordsman with the transcendent profoundness. It had to be said that Nie Tian's strength was far beyond his expectations. It even made him very afraid. However, everything had come to an end. Since he used the eye of the demon dragon, it meant that there was only one ending for Nie Tian, death. Is that so? At this time, Nie Tian looked at Heartless and laughed coldly. There was not the slightest fear in his eyes. Instead, there was cold contempt in his eyes. At this time, there was only one thought in Nye Tian's mind: end the battle quickly. He had already used the Supreme Dragon Vein on Heartless, so he didn't want to continue wasting time with Heartless. His opponents were not just Heartless. He still had to fight Gui Jiaozi and Jun Zueji. If he consumed too much power on Heartless, it would be very difficult to defeat Gui Jiaozi and Jun Zueji. Everyone looked at Nye Tian. They didn't understand why the latter could still be so calm and even look down on Heartless. Nye Tian, nothing must happen to you. Zhong Mingyu looked at Nye Tian from afar and said in his heart. He had already made up his mind to attack. If Nye Tian was in danger, he would directly attack. Nye Tian, you're courting death. At this time, Heartless was instantly enraged by Nye Tian's contempt. He roared and his eyes flickered. Suddenly, a dark and boundless dragon chi appeared and roared out. It was very terrifying. In an instant, the void within hundreds of thousands of meters fell into darkness as if night had fallen. Nye Tian felt the demon dragon chi in the surrounding space. His eyes narrowed slightly and the corner of his mouth twitched. His entire person seemed cold and evil. Die! The next moment, in the dark void, Heartless roar sounded, and then a huge and boundless dark dragon chi was released. A huge dark demon dragon that was tens of thousands of meters long drilled out of the void, and the oppressive space wailed. Everyone's eyes trembled. They could only see the boundless darkness, but they couldn't see what was happening in the darkness. Even experts like Zhong Mingyu couldn't penetrate the dark dragon chi. They could only watch and feel the power fluctuations in the void. Zhong Mingyu's divine sense locked onto Nye Tian. He didn't dare to be careless. Huh! At this time, he suddenly felt a dark power surging from Nye Tian's body. It seemed to be some kind of eye power, which made his face change and surprised. He didn't know that Nye Tian was a cultivator with other pupils. After a long time, the dark void gradually became clear. The figures of Nye Tian and Heartless slowly appeared in everyone's vision. High up in the sky, Nye Tianling stood as sharp as a sword. As for Heartless, his whole body was dripping with blood. His body was trembling and swaying, and he couldn't hold on any longer. How can this be? The eyes of the crowd trembled and they exclaimed. Their faces were full of disbelief. No one thought that Heartless would be defeated again in the battle with Nye Tian after activating the Demon Dragon Eye. Everyone's expression was sluggish. They looked at Nye Tian in horror, shocked to the extreme. No one knew how Nye Tian defeated Heartless. Your eyes, why? At this time, Heartless opened his mouth. His pair of eyes trembled as he looked at Nye Tian, but he couldn't speak. Chapter 3392. Tianwu's Sacred Order. Heartless, you have the Demon Dragon's Eye, but I have the other pupil. Nye Tian looked at Heartless, smiled faintly, and said, Unfortunately, your demonic dragon's eye is not as powerful as my other pupil. Other pupil. Nye Tian used the Devil's Eye and activated the Extreme Devil Exterminating Seal to defeat Heartless. The Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal pierced through the demon dragon formed by the Demon Dragon's Eye and pierced through Heartless' chest. It was a fatal blow. You! Heartless' eyes trembled. He wanted to say something, but the life force in his body was rapidly draining away, rendering him speechless. Blood-red marks appeared on his body. These were the injuries caused by the Extreme Devil Annihilation Mark. Heartless! At this time, the Absolute Eagle King finally reacted and let out a shrill scream. Bang! However, just as he finished speaking, Heartless' body suddenly trembled, and he actually exploded in the air, dripping with blood. The eyes of the crowd trembled violently. Horror was written all over their faces. Nobody would have thought that Heartless actually died just like that. Zhu Qing, the peerless genius of the Seven Extinction Devil Palace, the only swordsman who could control the Seven Extinction Devil Sword in millions of years, was dead. Such a shocking scene was something that no one had expected. Just how powerful was Nietian? Just what kind of terrifying power was hidden in his body? The shockingly talented Heartless still died in the hands of Nietian in the end. While everyone was still in shock, Nietian's figure flashed across the sky. He stopped, and a pair of pitch-black eyes and a black longsword appeared in his hands. They were the eyes of the demonic dragon and the 7 ultimate demonic sword. The eye of the demonic dragon and the 7 ultimate demonic sword. Everyone's eyes widened as they cried out in surprise. They stared at Nietian with their eyes wide open. Nietian directly took down Heartless Demonic Dragon's eye and 7 ultimate demonic sword. It wasn't strange that Nietian could obtain the demon dragon's eye, but how could he hold the 7 ultimate demon sword? Heartless was able to control the 7 extinction devil swords because he possessed the eyes of the demon dragon. However, Nietian hadn't fused with the demonic dragon's eye, so how could he resist the demonic chi of the 7 ultimate demonic sword? Nietian, he actually... Zhong Mingyu's eyes trembled as he looked at Nietian in horror, not knowing what to say. In that instant, he sensed the ripples of eye bloodline power in Nietian's body, and he was extremely shocked. But he did not expect that Nietian could actually kill Heartless so easily. The power displayed by Nietian far exceeded his expectations. Brat, leave behind the demonic dragon's eye and the 7 ultimate demonic sword. At this moment, a violent roar rang out as a silhouette appeared. In an instant, a terrifying pressure descended from the sky, gushing towards Nietian. Nietian frowned and instantly retreated. But that power was too terrifying. It pressed down on the sky, and there was no way to avoid it. Not good! The sudden scene caused Zhong Mingyu's eyes to tremble as he exclaimed. He did not expect that the Absolute Eagle King would actually directly attack Nietian at this moment. But at this moment, it was already too late for him to make a move. Boom! Just at the moment of life and death, a sword shadow suddenly broke through the air and tore open a part of the sky. Nietian's eyes flickered, and his figure nimbly dodged, avoiding the fatal blow. "It's you!" He steadied himself and turned around. What entered his eyes made his eyes tremble as he exclaimed in surprise. At this critical moment, the person who saved him was actually Yang Gungri. This was something that Nietian did not expect at all. There was a deep-seated hatred between Yang Gungri and Nietian. Why would he come to Nietian's rescue at this moment? Nietian had killed his son and grandson. He should be itching to skin Nietian alive. Why would he save Nietian? Nietian, the grudge between us is written off. Yang Gungri looked at Nietian with a dark expression and spoke in a low voice. Nietian frowned, confusion filling his face. Yang Gungri saved him just to reconcile with him? Could it be that Yang Gungri was afraid? That's right, Yang Gungri was afraid. The moment Nietian merged with the heart of the sky and became the lord of the sky, Yang Gungri was afraid. He knew that Nietian's future achievements would be limitless. At that moment, he began to search for an opportunity to reconcile with Nietian. He observed Zhong Mingyu several times, and the latter made a move. This undoubtedly meant that Nietian held an extremely important position in Zhong Mingyu's heart. Yang Gungri naturally knew Zhong Mingyu's identity. The latter had a powerful force supporting him. Zhong Mingyu's support meant that Nietian's future achievements would be unimaginable. Therefore, for the future of the Yang family, Yang Gungri gave up on avenging his son and even the eternal night demon fox just to reconcile with Nietian. Moreover, he knew that he had killed too many swordsmen in order to activate the eternal night burning god in the sky sword technique. If this matter was exposed, not only would he die, but the entire Yang family would be implicated. In order to leave the Yang family a way out, he had to save Nietian. The others looked at Yang Gungri, stunned. They could not react for a long time. "You're courting death." At this moment, Absolute Eagle King suddenly looked at Yang Gungri and roared. He released his sword aura crazily, and his killing intent was heavy. However, at this moment, Zhong Mingyu's figure appeared. He stared at Absolute Eagle King cold and scolded, "Absolute Eagle King, stop! Zhong Mingyu, if you don't show it, get out of my way!" Absolute Eagle King was completely enraged. He roared and his eyes were extremely cold. "Absolute Eagle King, if you take another step forward, the 7 Ultimate Demon Palace will be doomed." Not only did Zhong Mingyu not retreat, but he also took a step forward and took out a token. Heavenly Martial Sacred Token. Absolute Eagle King's eyes narrowed when he saw the token. He exclaimed in shock and his figure involuntarily took a few steps back. He had not expected Zhong Mingyu to take out the Heavenly Martial Sacred Token at this moment. He was very clear about what the Heavenly Martial Sacred Token meant. "Absolute Eagle King, if you take another step forward, I guarantee that the entire 7 Ultimate Demon Palace will disappear," Zhong Mingyu said coldly. His eyes flashed with Absolute Eagle King's aura. "Zhong Mingyu, get that kid to hand over the Eye of the Demon Dragon and the 7 Ultimate Demon Sword. The 7 Ultimate Demon Palace will not pursue the matter of Zhu Qing's death," Absolute Eagle King said solemnly. Zhong Mingyu furrowed his brows and turned to look at Nie Tian. The Eye of the Demon Dragon and the 7 Ultimate Demon Sword were the treasures of the 7 Ultimate Demon Palace. It was not strange that Absolute Eagle King wanted them back. However, the problem was, would Nie Tian return them to him? "He wants me to return the Eye of the Demon Dragon and the 7 Ultimate Demon Sword." Nie Tian took a step forward and looked at Absolute Eagle King. He sneered and said, "Do you think that's possible? Brat, you!" Absolute Eagle King's eyes trembled. He suddenly felt a lump of anger in his chest, and he could not speak.